morning and welcome to Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg and it's the 18th day of September 2024. Welcome to our show. Last night I was out very late, so if I'm a little, scratchy voice or whatever, well, we're going to have to deal with it because this is real news for real people by real people at the kitchen table. Today we've got a really interesting show on. I think it's going to be, awesome. And I do like to talk to everyone and hear their side of every story. So beginning, we're going to be on Liberty Essentials with Bill Mohr, Karen the Riveter, and Ralph the IT guy. And then at 10 o'clock, we've got a special edition with Ammon Bundy, Diego Rodriguez, Lori Marr, and Casey Whalen. I'm very much looking forward to this. There's a lot of controversy around so many issues. And I just want to make this absolutely clear so there's no understanding or misunderstanding out there. I talk to everyone, whether you agree or disagree with what they have to say. I'm listening for information. I'm not listening to form a popularity club. I'm not listening to, and this is what I've been trying to do with Brandenburg News Network, is let people talk. Tell how they believe, what they think about. I will tell you right now, I don't agree with anyone 100% of the time, but I do agree with the ability and the necessity of letting everyone speak their mind and to listen for information, not listen to form allegiances of this is a good guy, that's a bad guy. Sit here as sorting through all the people because we are wholly inadequate to do that. We can look at the situations, we can look at the processes, we can look at the law, we can look at defending each other's rights and that sort of thing. But I try to stay away from the popularity contest and the cult of personalities that are going on out there in so many different areas. So with that said, we're going to bring on the controversy and go ahead and say sometimes the unpopular things and listen to both sides in order to get to the truth. I think this is really important or get to some point of understanding so that we can all work together. Right now, this nation is terribly divided and incredibly divided. And I got to tell you, it is working against us as a nation. And I will tell you this, the other thing is that most of it is engineered in order to keep us divided so that we can't fight the real bad guys. And with that said, I'm going to bring on my buddies, Ralph the IT guy, Bill Mohr, and Karen the Riveter. How you guys doing?
Good morning.
Pretty good.
Am I going to be the only one without an avatar today?
Looks like it.
In all honesty, I'll let everybody know I am a mess today. Something came through. I picked up a bug a couple of days ago. It's like a nasal drainage thing, no real congestion, but man, I literally have been dripping from my nasal cavity for 2 days, and it doesn't affect anything else about me. So yeah, I'm kind of a mess. I'll probably mute in and out as I need to. But yeah, it's been a weird couple of days here. So I didn't.
We don't need to listen to your. Yeah,
everybody.
you're trying to avoid having us listen to the snuffleupagus effect.
Yeah, that's no joke either.
Did you ever see that guy in Sesame Street, the snuffleupagus?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Hey Bill, I got that image with a civil peace flag going vertically behind the man.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, there you go. There's the first bit of controversy for the day.
Yeah, so I had to choose an image because without an image, I'm sure everybody is. I'm not gonna pull it off, but without an image, it just shows a stupid little icon. And if we're gonna do anything, we got to do it to the best of our ability. So yeah, I like that, Ralph.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. Thanks so very much for being this morning.
Our tech guy over there. So instead of just showing a stupid little icon, it might as well be worthwhile and actually present a case. So in this case, you have a patriot taking out the two major parties, and the caption above it, which you can't see, is that we've had about enough out of YouTube, right? And that is absolutely true in American society today, and should be all across the board to get out of this political party mindset and start actually putting in statesmen instead of politicians.
We were talking about that last night, and it's got to come back to us being Americans and standing together. We don't have to agree on issues, But we need to make those decisions in our own lives and try to get to the truth and help other people get to a truth, which is moving closer towards God Almighty and our behavior and our persona, our character being like Him. And I believe the only way you can do that, honestly, and this is my belief system, is that you have to be you have to accept Jesus's gift of salvation, and the Holy Spirit will come and walk you through anything. And it's an amazing transformation when that does happen. But to get to those things that move us towards the character of God Himself, so that we want to be like Him because we love Him and we see the good things. We don't make excuses for the things that we do that are wrong, but we move forward in every step of the way in honor and truth and integrity, and that we bring the light of God, the true character of God into this very, very dark world that we live in. Now, as that said, no, there's not one person that's living right now who's perfect. Not one. We're all working through our salvation and working towards hopefully improvement, right? But in not making excuses for or justifying when we do something wrong. Say, yep, I screwed up. Own it and make a decision not to do it again. And that's really a better process. It's not like, okay, I just kicked my neighbor in the groin and I'm going to kick him again the next time I see him, right? That isn't okay. And so we don't do things like that if we really are on the path to serving God. We try to go through the things we don't do so well and we try to right them. And to do that, you have to have very controversial discussions to get to what is good and honorable, what is right and wrong, and make people think or help people to think through this so that they can come to their own conclusions on this as God leads them.
Yeah, that's a good layout of that. And I'll add to that. It's one thing we need to make sure of is that we hold to a standard. Though we aren't perfect, we have a perfect example.
Exactly.
And that standard is Christ. And under His law, right, basically set up as common law in this nation. Under His law, we find the perfect examples of how to live righteously.
And in service to each other. I mean, the way that the world is gone right now, it's so materialistic, and people are trying to grab. Yesterday was actually very sad because I saw a bad example of somebody who is not necessarily, it's not a bad thing, but it shows character of the heart. That it's that same orphanage mentality. I've talked about it a lot because I do have a daughter that we adopted at 3 years old, according to what they said. She's probably was more like 5 or 6 years old in actuality, who lived in an orphanage. And what happens when you don't have that family structure, that stability when you're very young, is that it's like complete and total survival kicks in. And when that happens, people are willing to crawl on top of everyone else and honestly sees most people as the enemy. And that's what we have in the United States of America. We are seeing each other as a threat and the enemy most of the time. And unless people agree with us 100% of the time, or kick us kibble to give us something so that as proof that we care, we end up looking at each other as the enemy and trying to more or less go after them instead of finding reasons to work together and saying, okay, they may not be exactly where they should be. I may not be exactly where I should be. But you know what? We're going to grab each other by the hands, and we're going to try to walk forward as one united nation, one nation under God, one world under God. And the highest calling, honestly, it's not the United States of America. The highest calling is the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
And I think that this has been so overlooked and honestly neglected. It's complete neglect of our fellow man, and seeing people and that have been honestly captured. And you can go back to the one verse in the Bible we wrestle not with flesh and blood. It's principalities and powers. And when you see someone who may not agree with how you think you should live, or what most of us would deem as sin, be it murder, be it some other things, you have to look at those people as being captured by demonic forces, by evil forces, and try to help them. Now, there are points in time where people have crossed the line and they will not and cannot be helped apart from God stepping in, and the only hope they have is God Almighty, because we people are not big enough to honestly turn around a heart that's actually been taken over by Satan. And I've seen people who are demon possessed. I mean, absolutely demon possessed, nothing left of their humanity whatsoever. And I'm going to call it out for what it is. It's demon possession. And they've gotten to the point where they cannot, there's nothing left of them human wise. They see people as the enemy. They are willing to hurt people, and they get joy out of hurting people or hurting animals or hurting something. I mean, that's what Satanists do. They sacrifice people and animals, right? There's no compassion there. There's no empathy. There's no compassion. They're devoid of anything that looks like a human being or what a human being actually looks like. And so to talk about these things, we have to frame it in that, with that lens, or we're just going to be fighting the battle on I don't even know the word I'm looking for right now, but we're fighting the battle at that point in time on subjects that come down to say like abortion, okay? Abortion, and as some things that people have made a personal decision on right and wrong. Okay, I don't think you can win those on arguing. You can present facts. You can say, I believe within my whole heart that abortion is murder. And I do. I think we're in, all you have to do is look at that flash of light at conception, and you can see there's something much more there than just a lump of cells. There's something that changes right there. And to have people have to confront those facts takes it out of an argument on opinion. And I think we've got to be very careful when we go there, because we alienate people based on people quite often based on just throwing out opinions without backing it with something that is real.
And I would say too that some of the strongest Christians that I know are the ones that screwed up the most in their lives and then came to Christ, because they know they need salvation. There are way too many Christians that feel like they have lived so perfectly that they don't rely on that salvation.
And this is what they do. They'll be going, I'm praying for you. And it's like, that's great, but not with that kind of a delivery. And when you do say something like that, you're kind of taking the glory away from God. It's God alone that does anything. We can pray quietly and not necessarily grandstand.
Yeah, and it's kind of, to a certain extent, I see it as like it's an arrogance that that you see in the self-righteousness of some, not all, but some Christians, particularly the ones that don't feel like they have screwed up as much as other people, and it in the grand scheme of things, we have all screwed up. We've all screwed up very badly. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We all need that salvation. It's not that, but for some people, it's more obvious to them that, yeah, I screwed up really bad, and and I know that, and so I know I need salvation. And some of those people are some of the strongest Christians that I know.
I agree with that.
What did Christ tell the Pharisees? To whom is forgiven much, loves much, right? We recognize that the deeper we fell in our sinful nature, to be forgiven of that, we love our Savior more than somebody per se who is raised up in a church in a family home, because we understand the depravity of the situation that we were in, right?
Right.
So
You're absolutely
think-
right.
And I think too, kind of returning to this, that this is one of the reasons. This is why I harp on the First Amendment rights so much, is because that ability, not ability, but obligation, really, for all of us to hear the points of view that we disagree with. That's part of the big problem with censorship, is by declaring this is the only thing that anyone's going to hear. Well, you need to hear that difference of opinions, because right or wrong, you have to question A, am I right? B, how do I know I'm right in my opinion? Can I actually back this up with something? And C, are they also right? And when you start squashing that down to a one aspect issue, you lose all of that nuance.
I think we have a great example of the political way to do this between RFK and Trump, because they both acknowledged publicly that they have differences of opinion, and that's okay. I was listening to RFK Jr.'s speech the other day when he endorsed Trump. Fantastic speech. Very well written and well delivered, and that's one of the things he talks about. I support him on the things that matter most, and we agree to disagree on other matters, but that's okay. We can still get along and focus on what matters most to children and things like that. So that, I thought it was fantastic, because he gave a fine example, because so many people don't even know how to do that. They just aren't given examples in their personal lives. And here's a man that a lot of people look up to, saying it's really simple, people.
Well, and
And
it's
this-
like last night I was at the log cabin. They started a new log cabin chapter in excuse me, in West Michigan. And Rick Grinnell was there. He's a wonderful, very smart, and he's a nice guy. I like him a lot. And I can tell you right now, I have a huge heart for everyone in the LGBT community. I really do. I don't like, and I'm very vocal about this, I don't like the gay pride parades and that sort of thing. And most of the people that I know that are gay and lesbian, they do not like these parades. And I'm like, I don't like them either, because they're funded by somebody to push an agenda. And I don't like any agenda that's being pushed instead of people just, being themselves. With that said, but one of the things that comes up a lot that I especially had when I was running actively for governor was I would have people, several, many actually, gay and lesbian people that would come up to me, because you talk to everybody, right? And the first thing they do is they'll go, and they do it the same way. They're like, so what are your ideas on gay and or lesbian marriage? And my answer, you want to know what my answer is every time? And it's talk about a jaw drop when I say it. I said, I think it's a stupid question, and I'm insulted that you would even ask me that question if you really want to know the truth, because the question is a dumb question. The question is why is the government in marriage at all?
Yep.
They shouldn't be. They should not be in there. It used to be that you had to have for a woman, a pelvic exam before you could get married. How is it that the government can mandate those kind of intrusions into your life? And furthermore, the only reason why marriage ever comes up in a political discussion of any type whatsoever is it's all about the money. Somebody is there. There is a favor given to a protected class. I don't care whether it's somebody wants to say it's the right, it's families to have children. I don't care who it is. It is giving a protected status to a subgroup of Americans, and that is wrong.
Yep.
And so when that discussion comes up, I think that as somebody, for myself, who is a very committed Christian, that subject has no place at this moment in time in politics, because it is pushing an agenda to grant special favors. And I mean, on both sides. So if the government got out and that just stopped funding or funneling money into these special favors issues, it would be all over. And one governor, if we had one honest governor in the state of Michigan, all of this would be done. Because I'm going to tell you what, if they cut the funding to all the transgender clinics that popped up after 2012, of whom Pritzker is such a major owner in, boom, the situation would be 95% over. If we cut the funding towards all of this other nonsense, boom, it would be over and people would get along. The root of all evil is the love of money and the manipulation of all of these issues to divide us and demonize us and turn us into a bunch of rats fighting over a pile of money is where almost all the problems are coming from. And if we did that, I'm going to tell you what, the church, which is wholly ineffective and apostate, just like the political parties right now. How many people stood up for the masks when the church is closed and threw an absolute tizzy fit when these 501 or the 501c3s closed the doors because they're government churches? I didn't hear hardly a squeak out there of people criticizing their own churches. It's just like the Jewish people. I hear hardly a squeak of them criticizing the policies that continue on the wars in the Middle East for the death, dismemberment, and murder of people by the millions across this world. Jewish, the Israel, Palestinians, all of them. And it's all about either the land or the money. China came into the United States for the land. And that's the root cause analysis right there.
Well, and I would say too that, that's one of the big problems right now with all of the funding of all of this is that they are forcing us all through threat of violence, because that is effectively what you've got right now with our taxation system. They are forcing us all to fund causes that we disagree with.
I agree with that 100%. We shouldn't do that.
And if you look at, I have a great deal of respect for the family that owns Hobby Lobby, for their stance on when Obamacare went through, which that should have never been called Obamacare, because that whole thing was actually largely pushed by the Republicans. But when that went through, they were trying to force the family that owns Hobby Lobby to provide, as part of their insurance package to their employees, provide for abortion. And that family disagreed with that very much, and they ended up having to, they refused to do it, and it ended up in a court battle, which resulted in a court decision that was arguably very limited in scope, unfortunately, saying that if a company is family owned and closely held, they can opt out on religious grounds of providing insurance that covers basically procedures that they religiously disagree with. And it was a major, it was a big deal. And it was because that family stood on their principles about not funding something that they disagreed with. But you see that all around in our culture, that we're both sides of any debate at this point are funding the side that they disagree with. It's not even just one-sided, it's both sides. It's like you look at how I think it's the U.S. Department of Agriculture funds the production of tobacco. And then the same, just about the same amount of money that they're putting into funding the tobacco farms is going to anti-smoking ads. So our government is funding both sides of that debate.
Convenient money laundering.
Yeah.
It's like that little icon. We've had enough of you. Had enough of both sides of the argument.
Yeah, and I would say that that's probably going on with nearly every issue if you look deep enough, that both sides are being funded by our government. So not only are you funding the side that you disagree with, you're also funding the side that you agree with, and you're paying for that battle to happen out in the open, which is silly.
Well, I know that one of the gals that wrote the legislation for the heartbeat bill, and quite honestly, they said that their biggest fight was with right to life. And they're like, they don't want to end this. And the reason being is that what are they going to do when all of a sudden this industry disappears? And I think that this is something that we all have to be really mindful of, is everything that looks like a good cause that we believe in is probably infiltrated. The cancer industry, I can tell you that right now, they don't have any interest at all in curing cancer. I had a cancer diagnosis, and I'm going to tell you this, they do not want to cure cancer.
Yep, I had cancer too, and it's incredibly obvious when you've been through it and you see what happens internally. As a cancer patient, I would not give money to any of the cancer causes as a cancer patient, because it doesn't do any good. You know, there are good people in the research section of that, but anything that they find that's actually effective, it ain't going to get out.
Yeah, I can tell you lots of things that are effective because I went off the grid. I went to an oncology center 4 times trying to get this thing figured out. Never took treatment because they really was pointless, and because they said it was an incurable cancer. And I was like, I'm done. I walked out and I never went back. And I decided to do some experimentation on my own body. And I got to tell you, I figured it out. And there's other people that are like myself who went off the grid and figured it out. Now, I'm not giving advice to anyone. You got to take responsibility. Don't go say, well, Brandenburg said this, because I'm going to tell you to shove it. And the reality is that you have to start taking responsibility in a very evil world right now that is preying on your emotions, your fears, your family, your everything that's good about you as a human being. Take responsibility for everything, and say, you know what? If my choice is whether to go to a cancer center or not, or to go off the grid, is going to be mine. And whether I live or die, it is my choice at this point in time to take either one of those paths. Because just because you abdicate responsibility doesn't mean that it wasn't your responsibility if things went wrong. You go to a doctor that carves you up and things go horribly wrong, it's still your choice because you went in there. And it was still people's choice to take the shot, the jab. There was enough warning out there for people. It was still people's choice. And honestly, God gives us those rights to make those individual choices. Now, are they right or wrong? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe God's accomplishing something else when things do go awry. I pretty much believe that that's the case. And I'm going to tell everybody right now, I was never sad for 1 minute or even upset in the least of having a cancer diagnosis. I walked away and I was like, okay, well, it's going to be an interesting day. And that was the end of my reaction.
Well, and you know, God gave us free will, and that's not just the free will to make good choices. That was also the free will to screw up and make bad choices.
Stupid Eve.
So
But God gave us that free will, and that is part of why it's also important to extend those freedoms to the general populace in the country. In my opinion, is that people need to have the ability to screw up. That's part of freedom.
All right, sorry, Bill. Are you done with the snuffleupagus?
Yeah, you brought up several interesting points, and one of which is that the state has been allowed to control so many different aspects. And you brought up something that Lenin rightly said, is that if there's no better way to lead the opposition than to control it ourselves, right?
Mhm.
So there are people promoting both sides of a narrative just because they don't want the actual facts coming out. If you can push a wrong narrative, a wrong agenda, and control the other side, thinking that you have somebody doing wrong and then somebody doing right, but controlling the people that are supposedly doing right uh, to lessen the law, they're still accomplishing their purpose, right? That is the idea. I think it was Abraham Lincoln that said, if you want to change law, you must first change public opinion, right? And he was absolutely right in that. There was, yeah, but he was
Hence the
absolutely right.
Federalist Papers.
Is that in the Federalist Papers too?
No, I just said hence the Federalist
Oh,
Papers. That's
yes.
what that was all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how they do it. They give both sides of a narrative to change the opinion of the people and keep them divided, so that no one actually fights the true battle at hand, right? Which is a spiritual battle. Donna, you brought up something in in Ephesians 6, where we fight not against principalities and powers, or we fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. It was funny that in 1699, the Geneva Bible, that a lot of the pilgrims had taken across into America, that actually stated that we fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and worldly governors and wickedness in high places, because they understood that the spiritual battle will manifest itself physically, and the people will be able to see it clear as day. So we are right. We do not fight person to person as it would be physical battles. However, the people manifest their spiritual side, and that is what needs to be at war with in our daily lives. Right? Scripture tells us that when our obedience is complete, and the paraphrase, I'm sorry, I don't have this one, but when our obedience is completed, that we revenge all disobedience. Right? Which means we're at war with lawlessness for all practical purposes. So, without further ado, Donna, you mentioned controversial topics, right?
Yeah, I love controversial topics, and I think that whether people agree or disagree, we can start understanding how each other thinks, and that helps us be better communicators.
Yep.
You know, because if I came up here and looked at everybody, I'm just going to say Ralph, and I said, "You're wrong. You are so wrong," and then pitched a tizzy fit about sitting here on any topic, which I rarely think that Ralph is wrong. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Okay? But
I'm wrong a lot.
yeah, not a whole lot. But the point being is that if you approach somebody in that manner, rather than looking at how they think and say, "I'm listening to you. Tell me more." That's one of my favorite statements to say to people. Tell me more, because I want to know how they think, and then you can have a communication that's like, well, have you ever considered this? It's so much more respectful, and opens a door not to just like treat them like the government treats us, but that's how we should be treating each other, person to person, with that respect that we may not agree, but God created them that way.
Yeah, and I think it was Spurgeon that rightly said, and this is also not a quote, but he was talking about truth, and if a lie is to be slain by the truth, then let it die. And that's the difference. I said it before. There's only two types of individuals, and that's lawful and lawless in this country, right? But if the truth of the law deems anything proven to be lawless, then it's the truth that should be upheld, and it's the law that should be upheld. We fight the same things in elections. We fight the same things in local governments and state governments. we can prove that they're lawless all day long. And that's how you have to do it, is you have to point to the law and say, this is the way it is. I've said it before. I try not to hold opinions, right? Because opinions are like armpits. Everyone has two of them and they all stink. So I try not to hold to opinions, but rather hold to truth. That's the only thing we can do as Americans and as Christians, is hold to truth, the foundation, right? So we talked a little bit before we started the show. And I said I wanted to discuss marriage, right? And this seems like an off political topic, right? But it is in fact something that guards our liberty. Okay, and you follow through. Feel free to interrupt me, but I'm not going to give a whole lot of my opinions out there, right? Because I don't care about my own opinions. I'll get it wrong. So we know that the Michigan State Constitution says, "We the people, grateful to Almighty God for the blessings of freedom and earnestly desiring to secure these blessings undiminished to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution." We know that this was illegally installed, but nonetheless installed and accepted by the people in 1963 during the most liberal Supreme Court that we had in the state of Michigan. Right? Article 1, Section 25. This is the only mention of any type of marriage in our Constitution. And that is that to secure and preserve the benefits of marriage for our society and for our future generations of children, right? Sounds a lot like the preamble already. The union of one man and one woman in marriage shall be the only agreement recognized as a marriage or similar union for any purpose. I want to point something out. Anywhere in here, does it give the authority to the state to license or nullify any marriage? Right? It does not. The only thing that we granted to the state was to recognize the ordination of marriage. Okay. And I'll take it one
and I
step
think
further.
that's important. There's an important point there that honestly, that goes back to the children, so that the state does not usurp the highest form of government, really, the simplest, which is a family.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why that was put in place is a simple biblical truth that Christ had told the Pharisees in Matthew 19. When they asked him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And he says, have you not read that he which made them from the beginning made them male and female? And for this cause shall a man leave father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. Therefore God hath joined together. Therefore God hath joined together. Let no man put asunder. Right? That's an ordination given to the church, and only to be recognized by the state. The state has no business in licensing marriages.
I agree.
And you can trust me when I say that me and my wife have often thought about getting a legal divorce just so we could be properly married. Right?
I love rebels. I
thought this on my father before I even got married, and to his better judgment said, no, you ought to do it. You ought to do it the way it's been done. And then several years later, he said, if I ever got married again, I wouldn't go get a license. And I wanted to slap him so bad. But nonetheless, right, the state has no business in licensing marriage, because a license by law, by definition, is a permit or a license to do that which is normally illegal. There's nothing to say marriage is illegal, right? Everybody can agree with that. We have the right to marry whomever we so choose within the common law given to us by God.
You know what it comes down to? It comes down to the fact that through marriage licenses, and all of this stuff, it is honestly the ability for the state to seize your children and your assets. It's all about giving the state jurisdiction over your assets. And that's exactly what they go after when they go through a divorce. They go after money judgments, because of course 98% of the judgments are money judgments and our civil action jurisdiction we've got going on, because they take a cut of it and it goes into the retirement fund for all of these criminals that are seated in the Department of Justice, that are on the payroll in our judicial system.
Yeah. And that those who have the power to license also have the power to revoke said license, as we know by the unconstitutional Department of Lara, right? What's the difference when you talk about marriage? If they have the power to license your marriage, which you do when you file that paperwork or when you apply for the license at the clerk, right? They have the power to revoke said license as well. Though I've never seen it done, that is the way that licenses work. Now, the way it ought to work is individuals should be able to be married within the ordination of the church and simply, what's the term? Basically, put the record in front of the clerk and say, you have to file this, right? This is an ordained marriage. You file this away. That way, if anybody ever comes and tries to, good grief, I'm at a loss for words today.
Basically asking them to witness it.
Yes. Yeah, right. They file it and make it legal. So if anybody ever comes to try to contest it, that there is record that these two people are married, right? For instance, if somebody tried to come and take your wife and say, oh, no, she's mine, we're going to get married. Nope, there's a paper saying that there's witnesses. Here they are. This was recognized by the clerk. You're in violation, and you are now punished for it under the law, right? So there's an agenda that's been being pushed since right around the 60s, 70s, into the 80s. It was pushed really hard, and nowadays we can see it flamboyantly, if I can use that word. And Donna, you brought it up regarding pride parades. Okay, there are those who wish to not only remove any recognition of male and female and make that a fluid statement, but also wish to destroy the foundations of a man and woman marriage. Okay, to say that anything can be married. If you look around, there are actually articles about women marrying trees. Right?
I saw one. This woman married her duvet on her bed because she loved her duvet on her bed so much. And I'm like, I don't even know what to say right now. You know, it's like this has gotten to the cat litter box nonsense in the classrooms.
Yeah, another one married an amusement park ride. I mean, this is how far we've got, right?
There was a guy in Japan that married an AI girlfriend, and then the service shut down. So that didn't work out so well for him.
Yeah, and that all goes back to Romans 1. Okay, just to lay the foundation here. Romans 1 says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness in men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, right? Or rather, who receive the truth and suppress it and don't let it out. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them, right? We're going to skip a couple down here. Wherefore, God also gave them up to uncleanliness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator. Amen. For this cause, God gave them up to vile affections. For even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise, also
the duvet thing has got it, right? Sorry.
Yeah, and likewise also the men, leaving the natural use for the woman, burn in their lust one towards another. Men with men working that which is unseemly and receiving in themselves the recompense of their error, which was meet. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient. Right? And it lists several of them: unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whispers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient parents, and it goes on and on and on, right? These are all from a reprobate mind that God has given them, as in people who reject the foundations of God's law far enough, he gives them over to whatever they want to desire. Okay? He leaves them to himself, just as he said that Jacob have I loved and Esau have I hated, right? A controversial scripture in the modern day church. That wasn't a love-hate relationship as we deem it today, but rather it was the love of Jacob, as in he would correct Jacob when he got out of line. He would chastise him when he violated the law. But Esau, he let go. He let go to his own desire, right? Esau became Edom, and later we know that the Edomites were destroyed. Okay, it only took God so long to handle that situation. But that all is in relationship to marriage, right? Fornication used to be punishable under the law. All the time it used to be punishable under the law. But somehow we have decided as beings, as human beings in America, that we can allow such things to happen because as long as it's done by consent, there's no violation of the law. And I'm telling you, fornication is still a violation of the law, whether we like it or not, right? The majority of us are guilty of such, right? I'll raise my hand. God forgave me of that. Praise to him for his grace. Okay. Otherwise I was bound to that and condemned under the law at that time. Okay. So we just read about how they're given up to a reprobate mind, right? The reprobate in the Webster's dictionary is defined as abandoned to sin. They understand that point, which means they're given up and they're left to their own sinfulness, their own desires. When it talks about the natural use of the woman or the natural use of men, I think everybody can understand that, right? Men and women are made different. We have different parts that work together, right? They work together. They make children. It's a
We
great
even
thing
think differently and we talk differently. Okay, I'm going to tell you that right there. You know, I'm married to left brain, and which is a beautiful thing. All right, I love men. I love my husband. Very, very left-brained individual, and he's actually really. I suppose he's really creative too. But we think differently. You know, if somebody threatened his family, it would be game on in a New York minute, and survivors would be questionable at that moment in time.
And that was the purpose for women, right? God gave men women that they could be a helpmeet. Because you girls, I tell you what, Donna and Karen, you can do stuff that I can't do, right? That I joke around all the time. The reason a lot of people ask, what's the reason you got married? Why do you love your spouse? And a lot of people get these nice emotional responses. Oh, I love the way she looks, or I love the way she makes me feel. Well, I'll tell you what, I love my wife because she's able to do the things that I wasn't able to do for myself, right? I would be living in a pigsty for the most part because I'm so focused on other things that I have to do that I typically won't take care of myself, right? I care more about others and my children and my wife than I do my own self. So she picks up that. She is able to take care of good grief, she's able to take care of more of the children and the house and me, right? You talk about a boatload of duties. That is what she has on her, and she does it willingly and with a grateful heart. That was the use of the women for the men, right? Besides having children, because men have a problem with not being able to have children by ourselves. Right? That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, you don't have the equipment for it. I hate to tell you that. When somebody, well, I got to tell you, as a woman who has given birth, when I hear about these birthing persons bullshit, I'm so done with it, because it's like, honey, I want to tell you what it's like to birth a child. There's not a man on the planet that would go through that. Not more than once, and they would be done. I've seen my husband with a cold. Okay, I'm going to tell you that, and it ain't happening. It is not going to happen, and it's really. Can I get off on a tangent here on what you just said?
Yeah.
All right. When I see the communication from the way a lot of Christians frame the things that you shouldn't do in the Bible, it's like they do it with a heart of condemnation and like, I'm better than you. You shouldn't do this because I'm not guilty of that. All those sins you listed, people will focus on one or two that they're not guilty of, that they don't do. And they forget the rest of them because they don't want to look at themselves and say, okay, I did this wrong and that was in the list and I shouldn't be a liar or cheat on my taxes or bear false witness against my neighbor. All of it. They want to pick out their pet thing and go after people instead of realizing the things that God told us not to do were for compassion. Because let's just say that you sleep around a lot. Okay. You're robbing yourself of those deep, meaningful relationships with other people around you. And that takes time, and it takes commitment, and it takes bearing with people in their failings and such. And what comes out of that, when you bear with another person instead of just switching them out because it wasn't convenient or you wanted something else because that's on your personal checklist, you rob yourself, and it ends in the destruction of great spirits that are willing to stand with each other for the things that matter, not those things that are instant gratification. The things that matter are hard won in this life. Honor, integrity, valor. You don't get that by going for instant gratification. You get that by bearing with people no matter what, and being able to stand for something as a personal choice. All of those things that God tells us not to do lead to destruction. And he's not doing it to be mean. He's not saying, don't run out in front of that truck to be mean. He's saying, I don't want to see you hurt.
Yeah, it is all for the betterment of mankind, or the betterment of his creation.
It's because he loves individuals, and he wants you as a good father to protect you of the things in this world that he created that are going to lend or end in hurt, pain, or destruction. A good parent will always tell their children, all right, don't do this. Don't touch the stove, before we stupidly put our hands on a stove, get burnt, and then walk away and want to blame everybody else, but for the fact that we didn't listen, right?
Yeah. So there was a case back in 1815, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, one of my favorite cases that I just learned about. But there was a clause in there that said the destruction, and this was by one of the Supreme Court justices, he said the destruction of morality in this nation renders the power of government invalid. Right? Yeah. And we said it before, that when John Adams said that the Constitution is made for a moral and religious people, it's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. That is the epitome of that, is when we destroy the foundations of the law, or the protections for what is good for us, right? When we destroy that foundation, we give ourselves up to all of these issues, all of these transgressions. Christ said in the New Testament that he who violates one portion of the law is guilty of it all. Right? There's no distinction. The law is given for the wicked, not the righteous, and it is used to uphold that in the justification of those who are righteous and the condemnation of those who are wicked. Right? That is the entire purpose of the law. If men were angels, we would have no need for government. I forget who said that. But so on this, regarding natural use of men and women, right, in marriage, how many people know that there are actually crimes against nature in our laws? The majority of people don't even know that. But in all 50 states at one point, there were crimes against nature, sometimes worded slightly different, but they all had the same basic meaning in effect. Majority of crimes against nature in all 50 states were punishable by the death penalty. Okay, they're pretty serious offenses. Currently, they're punishable as a felony up to maximum life in prison. Okay, which is unjust to say the least. If we're going to hold to God's moral law, then we need to take it for what it is, and the death penalty is deserved in criminal cases, right? Especially treason, which still is, luckily, at our federal level. But in Michigan, right? Because I don't know the other ones. There's 49 other ones, but in Michigan, if you were to look up Michigan compiled laws 750.158, you find crimes against nature. Okay. And YouTube can say whatever they want at this point, or any platform can say whatever they want. It's not my opinion. I'm not telling you anything. I am strictly reading text here. All right. But it says that any person who shall commit the abominable, remember back in Leviticus, where God calls homosexuality an abomination. He says, any person who shall commit the abominable and detestable act or crime against nature, either with mankind or with any animal, shall be found guilty of a penalty, punishable by imprisonment in the state pen of not more than 15 years, or if such person was at the time of the said offense a sexually delinquent person, may be punishable by imprisonment in the state prison for an indeterminate term, the minimum which shall be 1 day, the maximum which shall be life. Right? Those are crimes against nature. They used to be on the books in all 50 states, and slowly but surely they've been tearing down that fence. Why was it put in place? Because if you go back to Sodom and Gomorrah, they were guilty of numerous crimes, right? This was not the only one that they were guilty of, right? And
No, they were putting their virgin daughters out on the road because they didn't want to be disgraced
Yep.
for their guests. I mean, this is how corrupt they were, throwing their children out just so that a male guest, that they weren't disgraced.
Yeah, and there was a lot more than that. Ralph and I have even talked about the crime of regarding the laws of hospitality.
Yeah,
right?
I tend to think that was I tend to agree with it's another traditional view on that Sodom and Gomorrah, the story of that was more about violating the laws of hospitality than pretty much anything else, because those come up also in portions of the Old Testament, both immediately preceding and immediately following that.
Yep. Yeah, and there were a
guys,
lot of,
we're not going to be able to go over today too much, so I'm going to give you a heads up, but go ahead.
Yeah, so there was a lot that they were guilty of, but the point being is at that point they had been given up to the reprobate mind, and they were given to the unnatural affection one towards another, right? So those laws are still in effect, or should be, and they're not being enforced. Okay, that is strictly for the protection of us, the people, to secure the rights to ourselves and our posterity. Right. One of the things, Donna, you mentioned regarding pride parades. How many people remember the New York Pride Parade back in 2023? That was a blatant disregard for any of the laws that were set in place, and it was a blatant grooming of children that were set in place. The reason, how come do we know that? The majority of those that were there, I say majority because there are some who are just caught up in it that do not grasp the concept of the agenda being pushed. But they were chanting, we're here, we're queer, and we're coming for your children. Does anybody remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That is a huge agenda. The National American Man-Boy Love Association, right? NAMBLA. If you look at their main...
It's a threat. That is a direct threat.
Yeah, they say that sex before 8, before it's too late. It is all directed at our children, right? To demoralize them, to get them confused, to not protect them from these predators, right? That is the basis. I mean, we started out talking about marriage and ended up here, but that is the basis for Article 1, Section 25. It is to secure the rightful family, the nuclear family that was set up and ordained by God, protected by the church, which it's not being protected by, and protected by the laws stated in this union. Simple as that, right? Not my opinion. That's what it is. And that's something that we need to start protecting.
Well, and you look at the amount of pedophiles that are in the seats right now, which is shocking. It's shocking how many convictions there are for pedophiles that are sitting in the seats around our children. And, if you don't protect your children right now, and this is I think it's the highest calling. The state is trying to own our children, and they've taken jurisdiction, which they were not granted. And in my opinion, it is one of the most offensive and horrific crimes which has occurred during our lifetimes. And it's unspeakable horrors that have happened, is the state taking jurisdiction or actually kidnapping. We know that legal kidnapping is happening, and my next guests are going to be a perfect example, or a perfect discussion to have. And I didn't even plan this little segue here, but it's working for us. Is that the baby Cyrus that was taken away from the family by CPS, and all the other ones, when I had the Hamners on, that they took their daughter, and I was able to talk to her while she was in this facility, and all of a sudden I hear the boots in the background, and the little prison matrons for this 14-year-old who was removed by CPS from their family came in, and bam, shut the camera off because they didn't want it to be seen. But that's okay. We got the pictures up of the abuse that she received under the hands, or within the hands of Health and Human Services and CPS. And I'm going to go back there under Norton versus Shelby County. all of it needs to disappear.
They are criminal, unconstitutional organizations.
They are.
Absolutely. And they're left in place by every administration that we've seen in our entire lifetime.
And they prey on the children. And it's like, this is all of this nonsense needs to be funded and burned up in a fire, in a trash heap of bad ideas that have really. And I'm not saying go light your torches and pitchforks. Nobody out there be stupid. All right. There's a legal way to deal with this, but all of these things, they need to go away. This is part of how they've furthered this pure evil agenda. Right. With that said, I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds to finish up here and make last comments. And we're going to go on to our next guest, Diego Rodriguez, Casey Whalen, Lori Marr, and Ammon Bundy.
Well, just I guess I would say make sure you're listening to all sides of every issue and investigate further than the sides that are both being funded by our government.
Yeah. And the fact that they control the opposition is very important to understand. What we think we see, at least for the most part, what the people think is right or wrong, is actually wrong and slightly less wrong, right? So we have to make that distinction. We either hold to what's true, or the moment you start compromising, now you are also wrong. There is no such thing as less evil. There is only evil in that which is good.
Okay, Karen.
Yeah, biblically, we have all the answers, and sometimes it's hard to discern. You have to learn what the scripture actually means. But if the law goes against that, then we have to go against that. It's very simple. And the Romans scripture that he was reading that tells the truth about how God feels about our relationships, how our bodies were designed, and how we're supposed to be living. And anything opposite of that is against God's will. Sorry, but that's just the truth.
Well, I see failings, and I love this discussion because I see failings on any and all sides, because we're imperfect people living in this world together. And there also needs to be see it as a rescue mission. As a Christian, we can look at it as a rescue mission to look for God's lost sheep and help people when they're in dark places, making decisions that ultimately will lead to bad things happening in their lives. So with that said, I'm really thankful for you guys. Are great. I love you guys. I mean, I absolutely love being on every week because we're all friends, right? And I just love you all so much. And I'm appreciative of all the time that you put coming on here and the efforts to having these hard discussions, because most people don't have the guts to go there into these discussions and say what's on their mind. And we're going to fight for that from now until Christ comes back. And that's giving people who have been silenced a voice to be heard, and everybody's opinions and what they think is important. The only way that we can help each other is if we spend some time in understanding and listening realities, but listening to come to the truth and serving God in this earth. It's his world, it's his sandbox, and we're here to serve him. So thanks, guys.
Jesus didn't go to the tax collectors and prostitutes and tell them, you're going to hell, get away from me. He went to them and reached out and brought them into the fold.
Right.
Yep. And so with that said, we're going to go, perfect way to end that, Ralph. We're going to go into a quick break, and I'm going to bring on my next guest, Ammon Bundy, Diego Rodriguez, Lori Marr, and Casey, the great and awesome and amazing Casey Whalen. And if you don't follow him, bad choice. Bad choice. Get on his Substack and follow this guy. He's probably one of my favorite investigative reporters. He's right up there with Jonathan Cagle and Vicki Davis and all these guys. I mean, I'm talking about the true greats who are looking behind the scenes and not biting on the stupid headlines. And so we'll be right back. Good morning and welcome to the second hour of Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and it's the 18th day of September 2024, and welcome to our show. I'm very excited about this next segment, and I got to tell you, I love rebels. You know, and sometimes that term gets misconstrued, but I love people that are willing to stand against what's typically the go along to get along nonsense that's going on out there in this nation. It is part of the problem that we have is being brainwashed into being quiet and just going along to get along. It takes really true brave people to stand up when they see something that's absolutely wrong, that are willing to stand under all circumstances, regardless of personal damage or consequences to themselves, unwavering. And I got to tell you, I'm just very proud of every single person that's going to be coming on the broadcast today. And I want to introduce them to you, but I'm not going to say probably as much as I normally do in my normal ramble around and take too long to get to the point style, right? But I want them to talk and tell you what's been going on, because these are true patriots, and I'd love for you to give them a listen. So welcome to the show this morning, everyone. Diego, Lori, Ammon, and Casey. It's such an honor to have you here today.
It's great to be here.
Thank you.
I want to make sure everybody has sound. Casey and Ammon.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. Casey, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce everyone in this segment and kind of take the wheel on this a little bit, because you guys are all from North Idaho, and it looks like we got, famous statement by Donna Brandenburg, a goat rodeo of criminality in the seats of power up there. And you guys are standing strong against that and the violation of people's rights up there. So could you please introduce everyone, and let's get this show started.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on, Donna. I really appreciate the platform. It's been a while. Some people who are watching this are not familiar with people's rights, so I thought it'd be a unique opportunity to explain what the network is and what it has done over the years, and where it's at now and what the future may look like for this network. And I'll pass it off to each one of the great people here on the panel. But essentially, I invited Ammon Bundy to North Idaho. We're all from Idaho. Well, we were all from Idaho. Mainly Ammon and Diego and Lori were down in southern Idaho, and I was in northern Idaho. And I joined the network. I was already doing activism during COVID in 2020. I was really frustrated, and then I found out about, I didn't even know Ammon was in southern Idaho, and then he started this organization, this network, People's Rights, and I was really interested in it, and we'll delve into more of what it is. But after joining it, it was just was part and parcel to what I was already doing as far as activism and trying to stir up trouble, I guess, here in North Idaho over these COVID issues that were ongoing, and a lot of people were protesting, and so People's Rights was very attractive, and we'll get more into that. But I invited Ammon and Diego to this event I had called Liberate America at the Kootenai County Fairgrounds in the summer of 2020. I believe it was in June. We just came out of stage 2 into stage 3 of the COVID guidelines. And so we were able to have an outdoor event, which was like the most, I think it was in July actually, it was like the most horrible day you could imagine. It was cold, rainy. We were under just a canopy. And anyways, it was a successful event. We raised money and donated it to the Lavoie Finicum Legal Fund. And it was a free event. And we were demonized in the press, of course. The local Democrats called it undemocratic and damaging. And so anyways, from there, I just flourished. Ammon had been holding people's rights meetings in Emmett, Idaho at the time in April, or maybe even in March, I believe, 2020, when COVID started. And so he launched the network. But I'm going to hand it off to Lori real quick.
I got to tell you, I went and I started looking up sources and articles on everyone here. And so I was like, doing some research, because I usually do that and want to find more out about people. I did not find one article without having really to go down a long way that wasn't a hit piece and a crafted piece of fascist nonsense to go after people's character. And it was all based on opinion by low IQ Marxists That and right there, everybody should look at that right into there. And when you have a low IQ Marxists that are putting out hit pieces, that we're over the target here with this group of doing the right thing.
Yeah, obviously, it's been written about in the SPLC, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll get more into that in a little bit. But I want to hand it off to Lori to kind of give her, explain her side of things and what was going on in southern Idaho in 2020.
Well, back then I was on Facebook still. I've been banned off of Facebook, Instagram, and all of it. And I went back on and got banished again. So then I quit, which was good because I needed to get off Facebook anyway. But then when COVID hit, I already was an activist anyway. And I followed Ammon on Facebook, and he invited people to talk about what's going on. And I felt extremely convicted. I had when COVID hit, I had the resonance of 9/11 where it was just like something is really, really wrong. And so I felt really convicted to do something. The day that they announced that, or the day Brad Little announced that he was locking the state down, I went down to the state house and 6 feet apart because we don't know what's happening. We don't really know. But what we do know is that we have an absolute right to travel, to be outside, to feed our families. And so you're not going to shut my house down. So I went down to the Capitol building, and that just shows my character. And so I think I was kind of built for the People's Rights Network, peoplesrights.ws. That's the way to get there if you want to network with your neighbors. Go ahead, Casey.
Explain what the network is. We should do that from the start here. If you can just explain generally what it is.
Yeah, so People's Rights is basically a communication network. It's a communication platform to commune. I guess that's a bad word, but to be able to get with your neighbors and actually claim, use, and defend your rights. Because if we don't claim our rights, then they can't. Oh, that scared me. Okay. If you don't claim your rights, then they will go away because your rights cannot defend themselves. And so people that also felt convicted, of course, you have rubberneckers and other people as well, federal people that are scared of strong men because strong men can defend their families and their country and their Lord. And so they want men to be very impotent and weak. And so that's probably why they look at people's rights. But people's rights, you're with people that are of the same mind as you, that, you have a right, you have absolute rights to certain, activities, and like the right to go to church. And a lot of people think that Idaho is a really conservative state, but they were the first ones to ban hydroxychloroquine. They were the first ones to arrest a pastor. So red state means nothing unless you mean communist red flag state. Okay. So, so I ended up getting arrested during all of this as well, because I thought we had an absolute right to access the court. The federal constitution and the state constitution both said that, which put my life in jeopardy. I eventually got off, not like Ammon and Diego, but it was really hard on my business. And, they called my regional office and said I was assaulting officers and things like that. And so, but I survived. So, I'm just saying, like, you're short in stature, but you don't want to mess with Lori Marr. That's one thing I do want to say. You don't want to mess with her.
That's true.
I want to echo this for you guys too, is that this is a zero censorship platform. You may say anything that you feel like you want to say in any form that you want to say it. So don't hold back. If you want to say something, let her rip.
Well, I could go on for days, but I want to let the two guys give their little synopsis of what they've been through. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Diego or Ammon?
Go for it, Ammon. If I get started, I'm going to start saying racist things, and then Donna's going to take back what she just said about
that isn't
anything we want to say.
I know, I was defending the patriarchy. How dare me?
Yeah,
Well-
you're defending the patriarchy, and I was going to start saying things that make me sound like a white racist, because I've been accused of this, of course, that I am a white supremacist. And so that, having me and Ammon on here, the hick and the spick, you could get in a lot of trouble for that. Just so you know, Donna, you got some dangerous people here online with you.
Oh no, I don't know. Whatever shall I do?
But first of all, before we go to Ammon, I was going to say, Lori, great seeing you. Casey, great seeing you. It's been way too long. Good to see you here online. Ammon, my brother. I guess we should go way back to the 70s. Somewhere there was some confusion in a hospital, and I lost my brother from another mother, but God was good. And back in 2020, I reconnected with Ammon Bundy here, and it turns out that, he's my brother from another mother, and here we are.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Yeah, the People's Rights Network, and it is a network, was originally designed and still is this way to bring patriot groups together, individuals who just are simply wanting to know and feel that their rights are being infringed upon. It's just a network. I mean, we saw ultimately what government has been doing, and when I say government, I'm talking about the people in government, because I'm not necessarily against government. I'm not anti-government, but the people that are in our government right now, they're wicked, corrupt. They have turned our government into something that it never was meant to be. And so when I speak, I'm talking about, and I speak against, government, if you will. I'm talking about those in government. Yesterday was Constitutional Day, and our government, our country was formed as a constitutional republic, and yet they're treating it like it's a democracy where a mob rules. Well, that's what democracy is. A constitutional republic is where the people select certain representatives, and they are supposed to set forth the Constitution, and the Constitution outlines what they can do, or what they can do, and anything beyond that they're not supposed to do. But a democracy is where people elect other people, and they could just do whatever they want, which is mob rule. And so that's why we see, all these individuals on both sides saying, we got to save the democracy. Well, we're not a democracy. It's a terrible thing. Our founders understood that it was a democracy, was not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. Why is that important? If we are to actually save our nation and our country, it's important because the Constitution protects individual rights, the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to property. And what is happening is those in government are trying to claim those rights. This is the battle that we're in. Those in government are trying to claim those rights and say that those rights, the right to property, the right to liberty, the right to life, and many others, the right to your children, they're trying to claim and say that those rights belong to them. To somehow they belong to the government, a bureaucracy, agencies, agents, somehow that it belongs to them and that they give those rights to the people. And that's the battle. And people's rights was designed and set forth to unite people together to say, wait a minute, these rights are ours to claim them. That the right to our children, to what we do with our children, to how we make decisions with our children, where they go to school, their medical decisions, housing, all of those, that right belongs to the parents, to the individuals. The right to travel, the right to where we work, the right to where we live, those all belong to the individual, and that those in government can't have them. We're claiming them. That's what people's rights is. And then also we're going to use them, because if you don't use them, you lose them. If you don't exercise your right, if you haven't claimed them and said they're mine, and if you don't use them and exercise them, then you will lose them. And many times in order to exercise them, and also in order to claim them, you have to defend them. So we were bringing people together during a time during COVID when they were saying, you don't have a right to travel. You don't have a right to leave your home. You don't have a right to go to work. You don't have a right to worship. You don't have a right to do these things. But we were saying otherwise. These are our rights. That's why one of the very first things we did was we organized an Easter service where we got hundreds and hundreds of people right during the middle of the lockdown, right during the height of it. We brought hundreds of people together and had an Easter service. Well,
It was illicit, an
yeah.
illicit Easter service.
Yeah, and they went crazy. In fact, the FBI and all the major policing agencies in Idaho got together and had this meeting where they were deciding whether they were going to raid the Easter service or not and mass arrest people. Well, we have all those emails now. We know that they were talking about this, and I'm glad they didn't. But we're talking about in the United States of America having a Christian Easter service in Idaho, and they're talking about raiding that and mass arresting people. Well, and why would they do that? Because they believe that the right to worship belongs to them and not to the people.
And that was the ISP, right, Ammon?
Excuse me?
That was the Idaho State Police.
Idaho State Police in conjunction with the FBI Joint Terrorist Task Force.
Literally.
And
He's not
several
exaggerating
other-
there, folks. We have this from a FOIA request. And so it's literally the FBI Joint Terrorist Task Force who worked with the ISP and even the local sheriffs.
That's correct.
It's like through the fusion centers, right?
That's
Right.
correct. It was they have a fusion center where they all get together, all the heads of these law enforcement agencies get together, and it was all the way from state, federal, state, and local sheriffs and city. Now, I'm grateful that the sheriff in Gem County at the time, he's not the sheriff now, because the sheriff now, I'm sure, would have joined, Sheriff Wonder would have joined him, but the sheriff at the time refused, and I think actually the city police and Emmett refused. And luckily, we were doing it on private property. And those were the only elements that deterred them from coming in and mass arresting us during Easter services. And it's very clear in the FOIA requests and the emails and so forth. So, I mean, that's what we were facing. And it was very important to push back and say these rights to travel, these rights to worship, these rights to work, to provide, the right belong to the people and not to Governor Little or, whoever was in power at the time. And that's the main reason why we formed the People's Rights. But also, I learned very clearly at the Bundy Ranch that, that there's a pattern that's set in order to defend rights, in order to defend them. And you have to claim them, you have to use them, and then many times you have to call upon your neighbors to come together to defend them, because our government is not going to. They're going to try to take them away. They become tyrannical and adverse to the people. So this network is designed where you can know who your neighbors are. You could call upon them. It's a network, and it's very sophisticated with mass texting, mass email, ham radio, and many other ways to communicate. So that's what this is, and that's why we've set it up. You go to People's Rights we do it for website.ws. And we had to move everything offshores because anything that was on, the soil of the United States of America was being attacked and destroyed by our own government. So we had to move everything offshores, all the servers, all the, domains, everything offshore. So it's very secure. We have several different servers around the world, so it can't be taken down. And again, peoplesrights.ws for website.
So
And maybe before we go to Diego, just an example of how the network works is that the state is broken down into areas depending on population and how many people have joined People's Rights. If there's an issue in an area which consists of a specific number of counties, people in that area will contact an area assistant, and then the area assistant will send out a mass text letting people know we need people to show up at this business or this family residence to, whatever the case may be regarding government tyranny or overreach.
Yeah, and that is why, that's why it was attacked so much, because we are able to rally people in minutes, hundreds of people. And that happened many, many times during the COVID lockdowns. In Idaho, even though the government was extremely tyrannical and the governor was claiming that we all had to be locked down, and also calling on all the law enforcement agencies to enforce the lockdown. Even though he's doing that, when you looked at Idaho, it was nothing like Oregon. People were just living their life. that was because after several months of us, every time someone would be arrested or somebody, for example, a mother was arrested at a park for taking her children to the park. There was Christian pastors that were arrested for singing in a parking lot without masks. That's what was going on in Idaho. And we began to rally and respond to this. And finally, the law enforcement, such as like Meridian law enforcement, which arrested that mother, they determined that they just weren't going to enforce any COVID stuff because of the negative response that they were getting. Well, that was because of us. And so Idaho became relatively, well, in comparison, very free and very open. And none of the, after a few months of this, none of the enforcement was taking place. And that was because people stood up, claimed their rights, exercised them by going to work, by traveling, by going to church, by going to the stores, and then we came together and defended them when we needed to, and it works. And it's a very quick way for people to get together in their local communities, and it's completely controlled by the local community. It's not a hierarchy where there's one person like me at the top. It's completely structured where the local community communicates with the people in that community and have control of all the communications.
Is this like across the United States then? I'm assuming that this isn't just Idaho, but do you have people in Michigan on there and the community, is it extending?
Yeah, so there's I think right around 76,000 people in the network. But the one thing I say that in order to make it work in a local community, you have to have the area assistants that are willing to, actually communicate and gather and so forth. So wherever there's not an area in the United States, it's because we're just lacking area assistants, and they just need to come to us, get set up as an area assistant, get trained, and then they can start building their network in their area.
That's very cool.
It's a lot more effective than begging, pleading, cajoling legislators because we actually did try that too a little bit. And,
unfortunately.
Yeah. And so like a lot of us in the People's Rights Network, such as myself, where I did my duty. I was a precinct committeeman. We changed the platform, and they ignore the platform. They ignore you. The elected Republicans don't represent you. And so after, banging your head against a wall for so long, something like the People's Rights happens, and it just makes perfect sense. And it's been effective not only in Idaho, but in Oregon and Washington as well. And it's immediately effective, not months and months later, sue them, get your case dismissed, blah, blah, blah. It's immediately effective. And to me, it was like the last hope for the Republic, because otherwise, or if the Republic fails, it's also a hope for that as well.
I love it, because right now what I see with the political parties is they operate like a cult. They're vetting people at lower levels to make sure that they'll comply with what's happening at the upper levels, which is why nothing gets changed. It doesn't matter. It is wholly inadequate, and it's used basically to have a fundraiser, to have a fundraiser, to have a fundraiser, to have a fundraiser. They don't stand for anything in any significant way, because they're not in the fight. And you can watch them. They sit there and they watch rights being trampled on, but they're just watching that usurpation that's going on, and they're not addressing it with a baseline analysis and a plan to how to stop and attack the usurpations that's going on. I find it really despicable, because until people decide to get off of this and think for themselves, they're truly functioning with a go along and get along organizational process.
Well, I'll just kind of throw in there, if you don't mind, if you take a look at the Second Amendment, which I know everybody here is a big fan of. We all love the Second Amendment. And it's probably one of the reasons, if not the only reason, why the United States government has lasted this long under one constitution, when every single other country on the planet has had multiple overthrows and has changed their government multiple times. But what's the whole purpose of the Second Amendment is not so we can go hunting. It's not even so I can defend myself against some criminal next door who might want to come attack me. But we all know that the true purpose of the Second Amendment is to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government. That is the reason why it was put in there in the first place. And I share that with you because this whole concept of people's rights, it's the same, people's rights network, rather. It's the same idea, is that ultimately the power has to be with the people and not with these tyrannical government institutions or political parties, which George Washington, our first, wonderful godly president, warned us against. His departing speech, if you go back and read it, he gave multiple warnings to the United States of America and to the population. And the strongest warning of all was his warning against the spirit of party, which he saw taking over America and destroying this newly founded nation, is this whole attitude that people had a loyalty to a party or a movement instead of to individual principles, which George Washington, of course, famously was actually never truly part of a party, even though they tried to make him one. I said all to say is that
this happened in Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany was taken out. It was the party system that really instigated most of the problems in Nazi Germany. And why we're not learning from history is beyond me.
And it's where we're at right now. So, Ammon shared with me when we first met back in 2020 that, and it's hard to imagine that all these wonderful people here who I would consider my family, I didn't know any of them until 2020. And it's so hard to imagine because it feels like we go back forever. But I'll never forget, and Ammon, you can correct any details in how I recollect the story, but that Ammon shared with me that when he was back in 2014 there in Nevada at the Bundy Ranch and the famous Bunkerville standoff, etc., that he shared with me that at that moment, when all these people, I believe it was over 3,000 patriots from around the country had showed up to stand between the Bundy family, to physically stand between the Bundy family and 5 different, tyrannical law enforcement agencies, which numbered 280 or something like that, of these tyrannical law enforcement agencies. When he saw those 3,000 plus patriots stand between them, interpose himself between his family and these tyrants, that was like an epiphany or a revelation for him that is what the militia is. It is neighbors defending neighbors. And at the end of the day, this whole concept of, what government is supposed to be, it's hilarious that they call Ammon and I, anti-government, and others as well call us anti-government. And, on our website, which is freedomman.gs, not WS, but .gs, we have the Freedom Man Press, which is our blog, and we've posted on there all of our beliefs, etc. And one of the main ones is that I believe that government is ordained by God. The institution of government is literally ordained by God. Like, how much more pro-government can you be than for me to say that my faith tells me and my faith calls me to recognize the ordination of government by the Creator himself. God himself has ordained government, but God has also ordained the church. God has ordained the family. And if a family, if me as a father, I have 5 children and 4 grandchildren, which is pretty awesome. If me as a father, if I get out of line, I get outside of my jurisdiction, I have to be stopped. If a church becomes corrupt and tyrannical, it has to be stopped. If a government becomes tyrannical, it has to be stopped. So just because it exists in a corrupt form, it doesn't mean that it wasn't initially ordained by God. So what I am against, and I know what Ammon is against, and I know what Casey and Laurie are against, we're against corrupt government, not the institution of government. We're all in favor of order. We all want, law and order, but we don't want it to be corrupt. And that is what it has become. And so how do you stop that tyranny? What we've been trying to do for decades and decades, let's just vote the good guys in. And let's just vote the good guys in. And you vote a good guy in from time to time. What happens? He turns into a bad guy. Every time, right? They turn into a bad guy. There in Idaho, we have several friends who have gone into politics, and we've helped them to get elected. We've helped the process of their election. And I'll never forget one guy, close friend of our families. I told him to his face, I said, hey, man, you're going into Congress now. And so you know what's going to happen. Congress is a place where good men go to die. So I want you to know that once you become a congressman, they go to lose their souls, I told him. And I don't care that you're a congressman. When I see you going the wrong way, I'm going to tell you to your eyes. I'm going to tell you to your bald face that you're going the wrong way, or when you're doing something wrong, I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to, pay deference to the seat that you hold. And he looked me back in the eye and said, brother, I'm asking you to do that for me. Please do that for me. So sure enough, a couple of years go by and he starts going the wrong way. And I tell him to his face, you're going the wrong way. And he says, oh, you just want to be right all the time. He cuts me off and never talks to me ever again. And, you know, it's just, those are the stories that we all have them. Everybody here knows that, and we all understand it's true. So at the end of the day, how do you really preserve rights if government has this tendency to become corrupt? And I think it goes back to that revelation. And Ammon, you can kind of correct any error I had in explaining it, but it's that whole revelation that the people defending one another, or how Ammon likes to say it, neighbors defending neighbors. He said that multiple times, and it just resonates with me, so I remember that. That's at the end of the day how you preserve your rights. It's neighbors defending neighbors. And I think one of the reasons that I'm here today to have this conversation with you guys is we experienced it firsthand, as you mentioned the Baby Cyrus story, and Baby Cyrus is my grandson. And so he was taken physically from my daughter in front of my face, in front of my very eyes. And it was ultimately the prayers of all the people and the support of all the people and God doing a miracle. But God uses human agency to do miracles many times, not just in the Bible, but throughout history. And even recent times, God uses human agency. Can he snap his fingers and pull something out of the sky and just speak the words and it be done? Of course, those miracles happen. But so many miracles that we see even in the Bible and in modern times, God uses human agency. Judgment as well. You know, God judges people through human agency. He doesn't just send down angels with a flaming sword to cut your head off. Sometimes he'll send in the Roman army to destroy the entire city. So I said that to say that the agency and the human agency of the People's Rights Network was literally used by God as probably the most influential source in saving my grandson. And he's here with us today. He's strong and healthy because of the People's Rights Network. And even though that was kind of the most popular story, Baby Cyrus' story wasn't the only story of the People's Rights Network in various states being used to get children back who were kidnapped. And the problem with this story of children being kidnapped is that people think it's an isolated incident. Oh, it happened there with Baby Cyrus. It happened with that one baby in Washington. It happened with that one time in Oregon. No, it doesn't happen one time here, one time there. It happens 1,400 times a year in the state of Idaho, 4 times a day. I live in Florida now. It happens 50,000 times a year. That's over 40 times a day, every single day. And when I say it's happening, I'm talking, these are the numbers that I just gave for Florida, for innocent families, meaning families who've never abused their children, never abandoned their children. This issue, I really believe, is, if not the number one, it's in the top 3 most important issues facing America today. And I mean that with every fiber of my being. Until you've had your children physically stolen at the point of a gun from you for profit, because the government makes money off of this. Federal government pays every single state government. All 50 states are equally evil in this regard. Until that happens to you, and it's happening thousands of times every single day. 100,000 children, by the way, in the last 20 years have been lost, disappeared, who were taken by CPS and put in foster care. So imagine your child is taken from you, disappears, nobody's ever heard from ever again. And those who don't disappear, guess where they're most likely to end up? They're most likely to end up adopted or purchased by a homosexual couple. You heard the crew you had on here before. They were talking about, gay couples and other type of perversions. Well, where do gay people get their kids from? Their adopted kids. They can't have them biologically. Where do they get them from? They don't get them from Catholic charities or Christian adoption agencies. They get them from the government. They get them from foster care. So that means, anybody here, if you have a child who's 17 and a half years old or less, literally up to 17 and a half years old, CPS kidnaps these kids, often cases drugs them up, and then sells them on the black market or sells them directly to homosexual couples. And you will never see them ever again in your entire life, period. That happens uniquely in the United States of America.
Tara Rodas was a whistleblower that worked for Health and Human Services. And I think we can all agree at this point in time, and it's justified to say that CPS, HHS is the largest human trafficking organization kidnapping kids on certainly on American soil. And
in the history of the world. So I've studied this subject very, very deeply.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm going to go there too, because I think that when you really see the reality of what these people are doing, I had another gal that I was trying to help the family get back, the Hamners. And what happened to this child that they took? Well, they were out for dinner one night. They literally, and what they did with this child, and I've got pictures of the scars that happened to this girl, and have put them out there. Health and Human Services, CPS, should be absolutely eradicated, abolished off the face of this earth. It is such an evil entity, but both of them are evil entities, and they have done so much harm and crimes against humanity that we can never stop talking about this.
Well, God bless you for recognizing that, because you're 100% true. Talking about the People's Rights Network, I'll just share this and let everybody else kind of chime in. When baby Cyrus was kidnapped, this was a test case right there in southern Idaho for this type of situation. And even though we're talking, this was at midnight when the police had pulled over my daughter and my son-in-law, put them there in a gas station. The video's gone viral. Over 20 million people have seen it all over the country and world. But it was literally the People's Rights Network that was used. This entire network that has already been described to you by Ammon and Casey and Lori. And, the message went out, and literally after midnight in the middle of downtown, Garden City outside of Boise, Idaho, there was a dozen People's Rights Network members who showed up on the spot after midnight, got up out of their beds, and Ammon drove an hour away from where he was and drove straight over there and ended up protesting in front of the hospital, and he got arrested. Others got arrested that same night, and it was the People's Rights Network that literally prevented baby Cyrus from very possibly being lost forever. We actually know now that he was just one step away from being all the way. Well, I won't get into deep conspiracy theories, but we know for a fact that, the world's most famous child trafficker, Laura Silsby, literally is the world's most famous child trafficker because nobody has more, name recognition as an arrested child trafficker than Laura Silsby, who went down to Haiti and kidnapped 33 Haitian children, was caught by the Haitian authorities, put in a Haitian prison, and Bill and Hillary Clinton came in and personally negotiated her release. It's a famous story, all connected to Pizzagate, and then it becomes a conspiracy because of it being connected to Bill and Hillary Clinton. But they personally negotiated her release.
It's true. It's not a conspiracy.
It's just a simple fact that this is exactly what happened. Well, the part that most people don't know, Donna, is that same child trafficker, Laura Silsby, after her release was negotiated by Bill and Hillary Clinton, went back to Meridian, Idaho, where she became a foster care parent. And so we got the world's greatest and most greatest is the wrong term probably, but the most well-known child trafficker in terms of her name being published all over the world as an arrested child trafficker and being connected to other child traffickers. She is a foster care parent to this day in the state of Idaho as we speak right now.
Didn't they put her in charge of it's called Amber Alert in Michigan, where she was put in charge of the.
So she wasn't put in charge of it, but the company who had the federal contract for that called Alert Sense, and they've since changed their name. But the company who had the federal contract to provide that service, the Amber Alert system around the country, is there in Eagle, Idaho, which is also in that same small metro area. And when she came back, she was their executive vice president of marketing. And she did that for 7 or 8 years or something like that. So, we can all have conjecture there into what we think she was doing there and how in the world do you get the world's most famous child trafficker who is now the executive vice president of the company that provides the software to allegedly prevent child trafficking is absolutely bizarre. But those things only can happen in real life because nobody can write fiction that good.
Unbelievable. Yeah, and then to your point, I mean, we all need to start questioning some of these people like the Clinton Foundation and the global networks of pedophilia, including the Wonderland Network. They're all connected. If you look in behind the scenes and you start actually taking names and getting the connections there, you can really see exactly what's going on. This is a global crime syndicate going on. Well,
Donna, the simple question I ask people, and everybody just shuts their mouth because nobody wants to go there, and that is, they recognize themselves. This is not like us doing investigative research. When I say they, I'm talking about CPS nationwide. And it goes by different names. You mentioned Health and Human Services, which is the federal organization or department rather at the federal level, but every state has its version of Health and Human Services. It's called the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare in Idaho. In Florida, it's called the Department of Children and Families. In Michigan, I think it's called DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services or something like that. But it's all the same. It's Health and Human Services. And they themselves tell us that they've lost 100,000 children in the last 20 years. So the question I simply ask is, where did they go? What happened? Where are they? They weren't vaporized. They didn't go through an interdimensional portal to, like Stargate on another planet. What happened to these 100,000 children? And instantly the answer to that question starts going through people's minds, and people do not even want to go there.
Imagine the little mothers and the fathers that their babies were taken from them, and then they just disappeared. What do they do? What do you hire a lawyer and then go against, mostly in most states, the largest funded agency of the state? I know Idaho Department of Health and Welfare consumes a third of the state's annual budget. That's the largest department and the most funded department in Idaho. And you're going to say this little family has now somehow got to go against this department, and they just lost your child? Imagine the heartbreak and the destruction of the spirit that goes on with these little families, and that's the reality. And in most cases, I think, what is it, 83%, Diego, or something to that effect, where they actually admit
3.3%. Now remember, these are their numbers that they give us, not the numbers that we've gone searching for. So, if you trust the government numbers when the government gives them to you, then I got some swampland in Arizona to sell you. But the reality is, we understand they are skewing those numbers in their favor. So the 83% number that Ammon is giving you is they're telling us 83% of the time they admit that they take children unlawfully for no substantiated cause. Yeah. So in other words, CPS is always taking children under the guise of abandonment or neglect, that you're somehow abandonment, neglect, or abuse, right? So you harmed your children somewhere, you abandoned them, so they have to come in and take those kids. But they go back and audit themselves and they say, 83% of the time, there was no abuse, there was no neglect, there's completely innocent families. Nothing wrong has gone on, but let's just keep doing this.
And why are they not being held accountable for all these kids? Like I've heard 850,000 kids a year disappear from the United States of America. And when you've got an institution that you can prove has actually done damage, lost them, or whatever you want to call it, such, why is it that there's no accountability to this, that they could just skate through like the Clintons did with all of their nonsense without anybody saying a thing?
Well, the answer is very, very simple. And that is, the fox is controlling the hen house. And it's just that simple. You go to these judges, for example, the judge that was in the baby Cyrus case, you go to her, and you're expecting her to look at things and iron this out, and you find out that she's the lesbian lover of the person who is over the funds that determines whether the Department of Health and Welfare gets what they get from the federal government.
You can't make this stuff up. This is incredible.
You can't. And not only that, is she falsely accuses this little mother and father, who are just amazing little parents, with no evidence, no nothing, and then determines that they're going to keep baby Cyrus for at least another 6 weeks or something to that effect. And so they're not accountable because the people don't make them accountable. And what we did in getting baby Cyrus back is we made her accountable. We gathered enough people, we publicly made her accountable. And then also there were groups of people around the country, because they knew what was going on, that were going to come in. And if they weren't going to give baby Cyrus up, through the legal process, they were going to force it. And I was actually trying to hold those people off and say, let's give them a chance. Let's give them a chance. But they knew that this was happening. They knew that there was these people outside forces that were not going to be okay with them to just taking this baby. And so they finally get baby Cyrus up. But it was all because people came together and united. And this is where we're at with our rights. We cannot go to the courts. We can't go to the government. They're not going to give us and protect our children. They're not going to protect our liberties. They're not going to protect our properties. They're not going to. The only way that we're going to protect our rights, our liberties, our freedom, our families, our properties, and our country is by uniting together and stopping these crazy, wicked people that have completely taken over our government.
Let's
Why don't
call
you
them something
describe
else.
what
I
the
call them the parasite class. This is the people that are in the offices. They're parasites. They don't produce anything. All they do is eat off the American people that are hardworking Americans. They consume, they consume, they consume. They are absolutely parasites. And there's nothing else to call them at this point, you know?
I was going to say maybe you guys could
Yeah,
describe
and
the protests that were occurring. What Baby Cyrus was given back in 6 days. Is that right? If I remember correctly.
That's
yeah,
correct.
even after the judge ordered that a hearing would be, I think it was 5 or 6 weeks. So the order that the Department of Health and Welfare hang on to Baby Cyrus until the next hearing, which was, if I recall right, was like 5 or 6 weeks down the road. Even though that was what the judge determined, within a few days after that hearing, I think 3 days after that hearing, and a total of 6 days, Baby Cyrus was like a hot potato. They couldn't get rid of him fast enough. They couldn't give him back to the family fast enough. It was because we mounted such a unified effort to get him back, and it came from the people, and it was, it was authorized by the family. And when I say that, meaning, the family was wanting and needing help. And so we got behind them. We did all the things that we needed to do, and we got this baby back.
Can I make a request? I'd like some of our viewers here, because I'm based in Michigan. I know a little bit about it, but could you describe, Ammon, how this started with the ranch, so that if anybody out there doesn't know the story of how your personal journey with this and the usurpations of our government started, what can you tell everybody and give an account of that a little bit so that they can have some background?
Yeah, so my family settled the Southern Nevada area in 1877, and they've been ranching in that area ever since there. So it's over 150 years now. And they established rights. They followed the law. They established their water and grazing rights with the state of Nevada. And then in the 60s, there was this movement, and it was mostly to so that the federal government or the U.S. government can continue to spend more money. And they began to claim the basically appropriated or unclaimed land in the Western United States. And if you look at I'm getting to a point here, I won't go into this too far, but if you look at a map of federally controlled land, if you look west of the Colorado Rockies, 51% of the land is claimed by the federal government. And east of the Colorado Rockies, it's only 2%. And that's because people didn't come into the Western United States because it's very arid, and they didn't come in and claim the land as private property. And the federal government became adverse to the people in the, after the World War II in the 60s and early 70s, they started to become adverse to the people. And they're like, let's claim all this land, then we can claim the mineral rights, and we can also collateralize it so we can borrow more money. Well, my family here has already established rights clear back. I mean, in the 1800s, established these grazing rights, and they're deeded rights. They're deeded rights with the state of Nevada. They've already been claimed, and then the federal government comes in and says, "Well, you don't own those. We own those." And my dad's like, "The hell you don't." I mean, my family's been using these, and they're deeded with the state of Nevada, and they say we don't care, because there was this overall agenda to claim all the Western United unappropriated or established lands of the Western United States, so that they can benefit from the water, from the minerals, and also from the land use themselves. Well, so this ended up being a real battle between the ranchers, the miners, the loggers in the Western United States. And most of those people have been completely wiped off wiped off the land. The loggers, the miners, the ranchers. But my dad was really strong and just held on to them. And he was the last one out of 53 ranchers in that area. And he just said no. And so, during the Obama administration in 2014, Obama thought he had enough political power, and they have been building up these internal law enforcement agencies within these departments, such as the Bureau of Land Management and the Park Service and so forth. And so they came down upon my family with over 200 federal armed agents, surrounded the family, put snipers on the hill, locked up the ranch, began killing the cattle with helicopters and so forth, and abusing us when we were trying to just simply, protest and so forth. Body slamming my aunt to the ground, sicking dogs on us, so forth. Well, anyway, this went viral. Thank goodness this is before Facebook was, basically a fascist organization and couldn't tell whether it's a government or not. Before this, we could do live videos. And it got out what was happening. There was viral videos of them body slamming my aunt to the ground, sicking dogs on us. They tased me a whole bunch of times. We got pictures of them killing the cattle, and hundreds and then thousands of people started coming to the ranch. They were not okay with their government acting this way. And ultimately, they stood between these federal agents that are pointing guns and threatening to take our lives literally every day. They stood between them and us and demanded that they leave. And ultimately, they did leave. And my dad went back to ranching and so forth. Well, during that time, Diego mentioned it, I actually had, it was an amazing experience to just see. When my dad knew that cattle were starving or thirsting and baby calves were dying and so forth, and after the people came, they actually formed a group, and they actually started going out on the range so my dad and brothers and some of the ranch hands could actually go take care of the cattle. They were actually being protected by the people against our own government so that they could save the lives of their animals. To witness that is just unbelievable. It was changing, completely changed me. I could never, ever go back. And then I had some spiritual experiences where the Lord communicated with me. And I'm very, very, very unbashful in saying this. I received pure communication from the creator of this world, which I believe to be the Lord Jesus Christ. And
Amen.
it was in this sense. It was threefold. One, that he was going to protect my family, and he has. Even though it hasn't been easy, he has protected my family. Two, that he was going to bring a lot of people, and this happened before the gathering even came, before the videos went viral. Two, that he was going to gather a lot of people, and that we needed to prepare for them. My dad on Monday, without me even telling him, went to Las Vegas and got a full horse trailer full of bottled water, because he was feeling the same thing, that people were going to come. And then three, and I think this is the most important part, and kind of what Diego alluded to, was that I was going to witness and understand a pattern of what people must do in order to defend their liberties in this country and around the world. And that pattern, I didn't know it at the time, but became very evident. That pattern is when there's rights that God has given us, and that when those rights are threatened, that the individual need to say no. They need to say no. And then their neighbors need to come around them and defend them, because ultimately that is all that's going to be left. Our government is not going to protect our rights. Our national governments, our state governments, and our local governments are not going to protect our rights. And ultimately it's going to come down to our neighbors defending neighbors, neighbors defending neighbors. And that's the pattern that I understood from the Lord, from the creator of this world. And so if we are going to preserve liberty, meaning the right to worship, the right to own and control property, the right to raise our children the way we know they need to be raised, the right to even decide what we're going to put in our bodies, it's going to be done by neighbors coming together and defending each other. That's just the reality of it. And that's what it's always come down to.
That's a wonderful recount of what happened, honestly. And God is good. God does protect us when we take a stand for his good purposes, and when there's so much evil around us. Amazing. Where do you want to go next, Casey?
Let's. I'm sure Lori has something to add here. If you'd like to add something, Lori, we can go into the defamation lawsuit. I think that's important too for people to understand. People have a kind of an understanding of what people's rights is, so we should maybe go into the defamation lawsuit and then maybe where people's rights is going. I think Diego and Ammon, you had something to add to in that respect. So, Lori, you have something to add?
Okay. Well, I just actually want to speak to the having the relationship with Jesus Christ, the Lord and Creator of the universe, because at the end of the day, nothing can happen without His blessing. Otherwise, you're doing it from your ego. And so, I felt extremely convicted when Ammon was going through the thing in Nevada. I'm from Nevada, but I was in Idaho. And I was a mom and a worker. I was nobody. I'm nobody. So whenever everybody says that, well, nobody's going to do it, I always say, I'm nobody. And so I would pray. I was praying. I was like on the prayer team and I didn't even know these guys. And then when the Malheur County thing happened, I stayed home from work and I was just praying and making sure, hoping that everybody could get out since Lavoie was already assassinated. And so the Lord was already like prepping me to be involved because I was convicted way back then, even though I wasn't involved. But the defamation lawsuit really needs to be talked about. I don't know if I'm the right person to talk about that. Ammon is the one that has been hammered into a flat piece of tin at this point. And, it breaks my heart because, I wish there was more that we could have done, but I think that people are being enveloped by a spirit of fear. And so that's why you have to have the spirit of the Lord, because if you succumb to fear, then, you're just going to roll over, and silence is consent. So if you don't get up and say no, and you just sit there waiting for somebody else to do it, nobody's going to do it. Well, we all need to be nobody now.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So
Who wants to talk about it? Let's go into this because we need to talk about these things and then how to fight it. The lawsuit. Let's talk about that.
Maybe Diego can set it up, and then I'll give him my thoughts on it.
I'm sure you're sick of talking about it, but
that subject, it's one that has consumed, unfortunately, way too much of my life over the last 2 years. But Baby Cyrus was kidnapped in March of 2022. On March 11th, very specifically, we were scheduled to leave on March 15th. My family was, had the moving trucks pulling up to our house on March 15th, which would have been a Tuesday. The Friday night before that, which was March 11th, they kidnapped Baby Cyrus, and we were going to be moving to Florida was the whole plan. Well, of course, they kidnapped Baby Cyrus. We got him back in 6 days with the help of the People's Rights Network. And, my wife and my children and everybody all went to move to Florida. But myself and one of my daughters, we stayed behind in Idaho because even though my daughter and my son-in-law had Baby Cyrus back in their physical possession, he was still considered property of the state of Idaho for several more months until the entire thing was released. So that's a whole nother story that we don't have time to get into. But in May, it was May 4th of 2022, they officially said, okay, the state of Idaho is out of this and Baby Cyrus is your baby all over again. We give you permission to be the parents to your own child because we are the state and we have all power and we give you that permission. So once that happened on May 4th, 2 days later, we got everything. Okay, let's get out of here. Get out of Dodge. It's time to move as we were planning to do. So we move and we get down to Florida. And once we get down there 2 days later, I get notification that we're being sued. And who was suing us was St. Luke's Hospital. Now, St. Luke's Hospital was the hospital that was a grand participant in the government subsidized child trafficking ring. And what we found out is every single allopathic hospital across the country participates in the same way. And the reason for this, and it's very hard for people to understand until they follow the money trail. And, I've done, like 60 or 70 of these interviews regarding the Baby Cyrus case. And I found out after doing a half a dozen of them or so is that people are so taken by the story that they always think that there has to be some detail that we're not sharing. There's something that we don't know about. And because there's no way this could happen in America. There's no way this could happen in America. Because again, we just don't want to go there. There's certain subjects that we want to fight about, and there's other ones we say, oh, I don't want to go there. You know, close my eyes, close my ears. It's kind of like talking about abortion. Everybody can talk about abortion, but as soon as you take out a picture of an abortion, nobody wants to go there. Don't show the pictures. Do not show the pictures. Let's just talk about it as if it's an issue, a topic, but don't let anybody see what it actually is. Because if you ask any person, what's an abortion? Oh, well, you end the baby's life. But what is it? Like, what is the physical process? Like, we're talking about, can we do this process or not? What's the process? What do you do? Well, we can't talk about it. Let's just call it abortion. Let's not talk about, a doctor going into inside of a woman's uterus and with scissors dismembering a live human. You can't talk about that, and definitely don't show pictures, even though they exist. It's kind of like this. It's that same type of topic. We all know there's bad things going on in America, but don't talk about the government for money taking people's children away from them, from innocent families. Now, here's the thing that we have to start with. Once people understand that there is a money trail, then they all get it. And what I learned I had to do is I had to start off sharing with people that you have to understand the federal government pays every single state government since 1997. And this is how this all got started. All right. Previous to this, in 1974, there was another act called CAPTA, CAPTA. You guys could look it up. And this is basically the law that gave the government power over your children. And it was relatively benign at the time. Like all laws start off that way, right? Because they always have a plan in advance what they're going to do. On our side, we always want things done now. The left, they're patient. They understand you go step by step by step by step, and they take us where they want to take us. But in 1974, they got this thing started, but we didn't really have any issues because there was no funding apparatus for it. So if a state wanted to kidnap your kid, they had to pay for it out of pocket. Well, they ain't going to pay for it out of their pocket. Well, that all changed in 1997. In fact, I don't know how old everybody here is, but back in the 80s, you guys might remember that there was, like local groups in the 80s, very similar to like, what are those different type of fundraisers they have for Rotary clubs and things like this, where they would actually be doing fundraisers for foster care. Like we would have private institutions like, the Rotary Club and others who would hold fundraisers so they can have money to give to the government foster care system, which was started in 1974 by the CAPTA law, because the government didn't have a way to fund it. But there were legitimate cases of child abuse, as there still are today. We're not saying that there's not. And if you've got these legitimate cases of child abuse and you have these children and they're taken, well, what do we do with them? We need to be able to fund this process to take care of these kids. Well, there was no funding. So there was literally fundraisers that were being held so people could do this back then. Well, it all changed in 1997. In 1997, Hillary Clinton championed, and she's a proud champion of this, the ASFA law, ASFA, Adoption and Safe Families Act. And the Adoption and Safe Families Act, which was championed by Hillary Clinton and signed by Bill Clinton, it essentially took money from Social Security Title IV, meaning they did not have to create a new funding source or a new taxing source. They just take the money from Social Security. And they've transferred anywhere from $60 to $80 billion, according to the best sources. It's very difficult to calculate, but that's just direct payments from the Social Security Title IV funds directly to the 50 states. Now, all 50 states have to have some law that they all passed, but they've all done it now, in order to receive these funds. And basically, for anybody who's ever worked for any government institution before, in order to get the funds from the government, you have to check all the boxes, right? They say, okay, we're going to make this money available to you, but you have to do this, 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 this. So they go and they got to check off all those boxes. They did all those things in order to get that money for whatever it is that the government is making the money available for. In this case, it's for child welfare. And it's nothing more than government subsidized child trafficking. Because what are we doing? What's the definition of kidnap, by the way? The definition of kidnap is to forcefully take another human being for profit. Well, in the Bible, sounds like everybody here believes in the Bible. If you take another human being for profit, according to Exodus 21:16, that is a crime worthy of death. And the Bible very specifically says whether that person was taken for money or not. If you stole somebody for money, or if you just stole them, it's called man-stealing in the Bible. The word kidnap doesn't exist, at least not in the original authorized version. Some of the newer versions have changed the word man-stealing into kidnap because that's what it is. Well, man-stealing or kidnap is a capital crime in the Bible, meaning if you participate in kidnap, you are worthy of death, period. That's God's judgment. So I don't care what anybody else's opinion is. God's opinion is you're worthy of death. We just say, oh, no, we're going to give you a pat on the back and we're going to support you. And most churches across America, unfortunately, support CPS because they're completely ignorant to the fact that it's government subsidized child trafficking. I mean, what could possibly go wrong when you give institutions a financial incentive from the government to kidnap your children? What could possibly go wrong? Where people miss it, though, is these are direct payments. The federal government directly pays the state government, and that goes to the Department of Health and Welfare in whatever state you're in. But as soon as that child is in the care, the custody, the possession of a state, it opens up dozens, in some cases over 100 different funding apparatuses for other bureaucracies. So, for example, if that child is taken, and it always is taken, almost always, to a hospital, that hospital now is going to be open to Medicare and Medicaid funds that are not part of the $60 to $80 billion I just mentioned earlier. So now a hospital can take your child, in my case, baby Cyrus, who's my grandson, and as soon as they take him in there, they literally put a wristband with a barcode on it, and they just start ordering up every single thing imaginable. Hey, let's do a blood test. Beep. Oh, hey, let's do a CAT scan. Beep. Oh, hey, let's do some x-rays. Beep. Oh, hey, let's do this other test. Then they just start literally and this is literally how they're doing it. They're scanning just like a clerk at the grocery store for every single thing imaginable because the government's going to pay for it all through Medicare and Medicaid. So these hospitals are complicit. And we know they're getting paid through Medicare and Medicaid because it's all public information. And in the case of baby Cyrus, we know that while he was there with them for 3 days, more or less 3 days, that they received over $30,000 in payments for having baby Cyrus for 3 days. We know that because they said so in the discovery in the lawsuit that we have against us. We said all that to say that, okay, once you understand payments are being made, and who gets paid, by the way? The police agencies get paid. Ambulance companies get paid. Politicians get paid. The lobbyist organizations get paid. Judges get paid. Doctors, nurses, hospitals, a billion bureaucrats. I'm obviously being hyperbolic there, but all these different bureaucrats from all of a sudden these agencies that get grants for family counseling and conflict resolution and all these other different institutions that exist simply just to suck off of the government paps. And this is just everywhere, all throughout the entire country. So there's just billions and billions and billions of dollars at stake, literally. Well, the People's Rights Network exposed this. We exposed this when baby Cyrus was kidnapped because admittedly, I wasn't aware of all this stuff. We knew loosely that CPS was dangerous and bad because we homeschooled our 5 children, and anybody who homeschools their children knows that CPS is bad. But I didn't know the depth of it until they actually took my grandson. And so because we exposed this, and I immediately after baby Cyrus was kidnapped, Ammon suggested to me from what he learned at the Bundy Ranch that I hold a daily press conference. So I did. I held the daily press conference. Casey was kind enough to film them. And so they still exist to this day. We've posted them on our website. And the publication of every single bit of news information, and you have to understand, I'm naturally, this is my job anyhow in life, is I'm a natural researcher. I look into the details, I get the facts. When your grandson is kidnapped, what do you think you do? You just sit around all day long, go back to work, or you mess around and on the internet and just do nothing? No, every single day you're doing everything you can to research, to get information, to get legal help, to get support, what have you. And we are uncovering all types of unbelievable information about this government subsidized child trafficking network. So we publish it. As an example, St. Luke's Hospital has on site, and this is not unique to St. Luke's, almost every allopathic hospital across the country has this. They have an on-site CPS employee at the hospital on site.
That they give them an office and they actually reside in the hospital.
So they're ready at a moment's notice to take your kids away. Boom, just like that. And yeah, okay, cool. Casey's got some great links right there. So we're uncovering this stuff and I'm publishing it every day. And I am saying horrible things about them on a daily basis. So, you're saying horrible things because they're all true. Everything I'm saying I'm not making any false claims. They're all 100% true. Things, for example, like I've already shared here. Like I have said that, did you know that many Christian families have their children taken away and given to homosexual couples? That's a fact that they actually promote that themselves. The homosexual agencies promote that and share that. Number two, we share things like the fact that all these agencies are getting paid. We showed the picture he just showed right there about how baby Cyrus is being mistreated, how they left him in a pool of his vomit, how we can go on and on and on and on. Everything is 100% factual. And a single solitary thing that I said or that anybody said that was not true. However, what we have now since learned is that the famous tool used by these different organizations and the famous tool used by all these different deep state advocates, if you want to go after an innocent person, you get them with defamation. They use it against President Trump. They use it against Rudy Giuliani. They famously have almost completely shut down Alex Jones. None of these people have committed any crimes. Maybe some of them have, I don't know, but the crime was not one of defamation. In our case, they did the same thing. So, all right, how are we going to get these guys? Let's sue them for defamation. Let's sue Ammon and Diego for defamation. Now, Ammon was the one who took most of the arrows because he was the famous guy, right? And he was the easy boogeyman for the left. For whatever reason, the left thinks that Ammon Bundy is the scariest guy ever. In fact, it's kind of a funny term now we like to use. He's the scary guy. And so everybody has to have their boogeyman. And so Ammon Bundy is the scary guy.
He's like Ammon bin Laden or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And
He's a boogeyman.
Baseline failure to identify what you're looking at here. You look like a great big teddy bear to me.
Well, I've got a lot gray.
Everybody knows Ammon knows that's what he is. And he's a peaceful guy, but they have to make him the boogeyman.
Can you touch on the flyers real quick, Diego, before we get to the lawsuit? As far as handing out the flyers to the you went.
Talk about that. Well, Ammon, maybe you should talk about that because that was I didn't make those flyers, but I was certainly glad that you guys did.
Yeah. So one of the things that, there's kind of a protocol that we have built in people's rights of how to defend somebody's rights, what to do when someone comes to you and needs help. And basically what it is to put a whole bunch of personal accountability on the bad actors, right? I mean, I'm talking about, as much pressure as you can on the bad actors. Don't let them just, don't mention that it's the Department of Health and Welfare that's doing this or St. Luke's is doing this. You've got to mention their names. You got to put pressure on them. They got to feel accountable themselves or they're not going to change. If they feel they're protected by their agency or protected by, the law or the court or whatever, they're not going to do anything. So one of the things that we did is the bad actors that actually were participated in the taking of baby Cyrus and that still had the authority to let him go. We made these posters and we told people to go protest at their houses. And anyway, do you have some of those, Casey? Did you say you have one of those? And people might not like that. And I don't even know if I like it. But the reality is, if you do not hold the person accountable who is making the decisions, you're not going to get anything to change. Because
can I say?
Go ahead, Lori.
Well, I just wanted to say, do you like disciplining your child? Do you like cleaning the toilet? No, but that does not mean that it does not need to be done.
Very good analogy. And so we learned that a long time ago, that you're just wasting your time if you go hire a lawyer and you're trying to go into the court system. That's just a lot of money, waste of time. Or if you try to scream at empty buildings in a parking lot, that just doesn't work. You have to find out who the bad actor is and also who has the power to change it, and you have to put personal accountability and personal pressure upon those people, and then all of a sudden things start to change. And you're always going to be honest, and you're always going to be respectful. I mean, you don't go onto their private property, right? You stay on public property. You recognize that they have rights too, and you act within those rights, but you also have to put personal accountability on. So that's what we did here. We put a lot of personal accountability on the judge. We put a ton of personal accountability upon the CPS agents that were making the decisions.
And by name, like I cannot emphasize how important it is by name. This is my big issue is we don't just say the police did the bad thing. We say, no, Police Detective Steve Hansen, badge number 3534, and Meridian Police Detective Jeff Fuller, badge number 3138, and Sergeant Christopher McGilvery and Judge Lori Fortier and the prosecuting attorney Kyle Bringhurst. We name their names, and it scares people to death. And the reason people are scared to death is because that's what accountability is. I hate it when we call them the deep state. I hate when we say the bad guys or the powers that be. Name them. Tell us their name. When you give people their name, the reason people don't like it is, well, I don't want them to do that to me. Well, then don't be a bad guy. Don't do wrong. If you're evil, your name deserves to be associated with evil. It's just that simple. These people are all participating, and they're all complicit in the world's largest government subsidized child trafficking ring of all time. They are kidnapping. Think about it. God says they're worthy of death, and we go, well, we shouldn't even mention their name because we don't want them to feel bad. They're
just doing their job, I mean, they're just doing their job. It's like the marshals. I told the marshals, it's not the judge that's keeping me out of this courtroom. It's you. You're following the judge's order, but you're the actual tyrant because you're the one that is violating my rights right now. So I just had to say that.
True.
And that
go ahead, bro.
That personal accountability is what completely changes the circumstance, and that's what people need to understand. And then when you have that with a body of people that will actually go and put that accountability upon the people, that's how you change things. Well, we've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this since 2014 very effectively, and we have extremely successful. Sorry, my phone called. I had to get off the.
This is what it is. It's real news for real people by real people at the kitchen table here. This is what we do every day on Brandenburg News Network.
I should have probably blocked my.
Because you know what? It's authentic. It's real, and I think that's an important part of it. Nobody can say that this has all been edited or photoshopped or anything. This is just the way it is.
Yeah, I just got a phone call from my brother-in-law, so it's very real, very real going on. So, anyhow, we've been very successful at this, and when I say they, those in basically the bureaucrats in these government agencies, they needed a way to stop what was happening, and particularly the FBI. To be honest with you, the FBI is behind a tremendous amount of this, including the lawsuit. However, they needed a way to stop what we were doing. We found a solution to the problem that we see all over this country. We found a solution, and we were being successful at it. And so they needed to stop this process, and they came after me. They came after Diego through a defamation lawsuit. And that lawsuit is not only to just destroy you financially and to turn your life upside down, which does do that, but the lawsuit is also to discredit you, so that people won't come at your call when you're trying to unite people. So that and for two reasons. One is there's this gray area where they question whether you're being honest because there was a defamation lawsuit. One, or two, if they know you're an honest person, which I think the majority of the people in the network and across the state, to be honest with you. Two, they're afraid to come because
that's the biggest thing.
That's the biggest thing is to make people stand down.
Yeah, and so
it works, unfortunately.
And so when a person's rights, remember the pattern that I understood was that when someone's rights were being violated and that person says, no, I'm not going to give up my right, then neighbors and people are supposed to come around that person to defend. Well, this defamation lawsuit and what they're doing to us is designed to make it so that people will not come to the call. Well, they won't come to the call of your neighbor because they're afraid they're going to be sued with defamation, or they're afraid they're going to be arrested, or they're afraid. And fear is Satan's tool. And so, I mean, that is the design of this. And, it has worked in somewhat in this case, although we fight lots of battles in the war. We lose a few, we win, so I don't believe that the war is over by any means, but they sued Diego and I, They took my home. They took all my income. They took my bank accounts. They took all my commercial properties. They took everything from me. Then they got a warrant for my arrest for $10,000 in Gem County and $250,000 in Ada County, and pretty much caused me to flee the state. And well, not pretty much, they did. And even though I do have a lot of faith that these things will be worked out in the end, I know they'll be worked out and if not in this life, in the next life, because God brings justice to all things. If we don't use the atoning sacrifice of our Lord Jesus Christ, we will have to pay for our own sins. So I do know that, but it's still right now in a situation where these people have kind of got away with what they designed to do, and that is to try to destroy the network. And when I say that, because they basically stopped the ability of me being able to gather people. But the network, the People's Rights Network, was never supposed to be designed around one person, one or two people. And the way it was built and the way it was designed, where it doesn't matter whether I'm in the picture or not. The area assistants are supposed to be able to be brave enough, and they have the communication tools that they can gather people together, whether one person is being attacked as a spearhead or not. And so, and so the test is out there, whether the People's Rights Network is going to continue to work with or without me. I'm going to continue to do what I do. I did just the other day, I was helping an individual who was arrested, I believe wrongfully. And I'm not afraid to still help and still try to defend people. Even though I have a $250,000 warrant against me, and Diego does too. I think Diego has a $25,000 warrant. If we step in the state of Idaho right now, we'll get arrested and they'll put us in their jails for who knows how long, and we'll have to.
I got two of them now.
You got another one? Oh, well.
Yes,
right
I got one for $75,000, one for $25,000. Here's the humorous thing, Donna. If you go into Idaho and you take a look at the murderers and the people who've killed people and, like the worst crimes imaginable, we kind of put murder at the top. Their bonds are like $25,000, sometimes $10,000 or $15,000. Ammon Bundy has a $250,000 bond for no crime. It's a civil lawsuit. There's no crime.
Yeah, I've never
I have,
heard.
$50,000 and $25,000, $75,000, no crime. So we have these unbelievable bonds for no crime whatsoever. Our crime is we exposed the government subsidized child trafficking ring, period. However, we're happy to do so because isn't that what we're supposed to be? Salt and light. When we hear that term salt and light, what is it? Well, salt preserves, light exposes. And this is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be exposing the dark parts of our society. And we're supposed to be preserving what God has given us, making things better. That's what salt does. If you don't think salt makes things better, try eating food without salt. And you go, man, salt makes things better. It takes whatever is there and makes it even better. And it also preserves. Light exposes, and we have to expose. It is our duty. It's our responsibility. I want to have government, but I want to have a clean government. I want to have a non-corrupt government. We want to have law and order. We want to have peace and tranquility. And incidentally and remarkably, all the protocols Ammon was talking about earlier and all the history of the People's Rights Network since 2020, I guess, is 100% peaceful. I mean, it's so humorous to see the people on the other side always claim that we would do what they do. It's Antifa and the leftists who are the ones who are blowing up buildings and lighting things on fire and causing property damage. We don't cause property damage because we don't believe in it. It's against our belief system. We respect people's property. If somebody else is a criminal, I still respect his property. If someone else is a bad guy or an evil guy, I don't think I can steal his car because he's a bad person. But they think that they can steal our kids and do God only knows what with him. So there's no violence on our side, but there's one of the few things we've recognized that, the enemy hates is exposure. It cannot stand to be exposed. This is why they want to hide behind big titles. They want to hide behind, the government, the police. Those are all titles. Hospitals, doctors. Don't just say doctors, because then also what happens is it makes people hate institutions instead of hate individuals. Like there's a lot of people on our side who hate cops. Why? Because they had a bad experience with a cop. Well, not all cops are bad. Not all preachers are bad. Not all fathers are bad. Not you can't just blanket any title and say they're all bad. They're also not all good. Not all fathers are good. Not all preachers are good, and not all cops are good. So we have to call them by name and say, this cop is a bad cop. We have them on here on our website. Steve Hansen is a bad cop who arrested my daughter and took baby Cyrus out of her hands under threat of harm to baby Cyrus. Let him go or he's going to be harmed. And same with, Jeff Fuller, Christopher McGilvery, this pervert, Sean King, Dr. Natasha Erickson. I can go down and name them because we have them all here on our website, which incidentally.
Which website is it on and where do I find them?
Go to babyscyrus.com.
Okay.
So Donna, I'm going to say something to your listeners, and I'll say it to you too, because what Diego is talking about right now, and by using names and exposing them further, your network and this program will become under attack. I can
guarantee you I've already come under attack.
I understand that you will not, because of this, for example, Dr. Natasha Erickson, who threatened CPS upon this little family right here, threatened. Just by saying that right now, even though we have her own medical report saying that she told the family that she was going to call CPS if they didn't obey her medical demands, right? But by saying that, there's a really good chance that this network will be attacked more than it's probably ever been in history. So
really quick, just to add what Ammon said really fast. I'll insert this because people say, well, how could that be? How could she say that and you guys still get sued? Well, understand that she has that in the medical reports that we have access to, and we have copies of it. And they're here on the page you're on right now. You can scroll down and you can even see them. If you click that first button there, it says first time here, click there, it'll tell you the whole story. But we were not allowed to bring any evidence to the lawsuit. So we're sued, but there was a court order made by the judge that said you're not allowed to bring any evidence to support your case to the lawsuit, and any responses you made in the lawsuit are struck from the record so the jury can never see it. That's what you call due process in America today. People, that can't be true. That can't be true. If it can't be true, then explain the order that's right here in front of your face, because we've posted all of it on this website. So sorry to interrupt you there, Ammon, but I've heard so many people say that can't be true. Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I mean, the order not only just blankly says you can't bring stuff into the trial, it actually specifically says that you cannot talk, and they're talking about anybody, that you cannot say or talk about Dr. Natasha Erickson threatening the family with CPS if they don't obey her medical demands. Right now, by saying that, right, what Diego and I are saying, right now we are in violation of a court order. But yet it's an absolute fact. Natasha Erickson did say those things, did threaten that family. And we have absolute proof of it. We have our own medical notes. But by actually saying that, we are in contempt of court, supposedly. And that's why they keep issuing more warrants against us. And so by talking here and by actually distributing this information, which is what they're going to say you're doing, is in a violation of a court order.
And maybe you can talk about how they try to shut down the websites too.
They did.
Yeah.
I'll start with ours first. So the one they went after first was Freedom Man, which is a website you had up there right now. It used to be freedomman.org, then it was freedomman.net, and then we have another one which is we completely exposed St. Luke's, called St. Luke's Exposed, is now .gs. It used to be stluke'sexposed.com, stluke'sexposed.net, then it was stluke's.exposed. And so they basically our website's been hosted offshore for years. I say I mean Freedom Man. I no longer have control of these websites. But I did previously, and we had always hosted them offshore for the fact that we're, a freedom of speech website, and the government's always shutting down those types of websites. And so we knew that, and we had it offshore. What we did not know is that for those who understand the way technology works and websites work and the way the internet works, there's a difference between hosting and registration. So you have a registrar who registers your domain name, like, yours is the Brandenburg News Network I see up there on top. So you probably got a website like brandenburgnewsnetwork.com or something like that. Well, that's the registrar who registered the domain name, and you're hosting it somewhere as well. most people use the same company to do both, right? They both, GoDaddy is a popular one, Bluehost. These are, famous and popular ones. What we didn't realize is that the registrar who registers your domain name, like almost every single one on planet Earth, there's, I think, a half a dozen or something like that are not under American jurisdiction. America basically created the internet. Al Gore famously created it. That's a joke, by the way. And
he kind of enabled it, so he's partially right, but that's one of those low IQ moron politicians that
exactly
that, are right. Even a clock's right twice a day.
That's right. That's right. So anyhow, what that means is that a court order from a U.S. judge can be taken to a domain name registrar, and the domain registrar will take your domain down because nobody owns a domain. If you don't own your actual domain name. You just basically have rights over it to the extent that it's part of the terms and conditions, but you don't own it. And so they basically just take it away. And they basically can do it with a very simple, it doesn't have to be a lawsuit. It's basically goes to arbitration because that's all part of the terms and conditions. And while it's even contrary to their own rules, you've got these companies. I'll just use GoDaddy as an example. That's not who we were with. I think it was Namecheap there in Arizona. And we pay them, what, $20 a year for domain name registration like the rest of you guys. So they've got this huge lawsuit coming against them if they don't comply with these orders that ultimately, if they fight it, they could possibly win, but they're going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to fight a lawsuit. So they go thousands and thousands of dollars to fight this lawsuit to do the right thing, or we lose $20 a year from this dude over here. And what I found in the last couple of years going through this lawsuit is that 99.999% of all people fold when they are threatened with a lawsuit because people are terrified of the consequences and they just make a decision to not even bother. And sometimes it's the right decision to not bother. I agree with it many times. Like, hey, why do I want to spend 5 years of my life and $500,000 when I could just pay the $5,000 fee? It's like a bribe. It's like if you're in Mexico and you get pulled over by the cop. Do you want to fight the whole thing or you just give him $20 to be on his way? It's not good. It's not righteous, but you have to make a decision. And that's what they did. So they make a decision. So they take our website. The website goes down. So we would have it put up again. It happened over and over and over again until finally, I don't have control of them anymore. But now we have it all protected by having the domain name registration and having the hosting are both offshore. And when you're going to start seeing this a lot, Donna, you and your viewers, if they start, how come people aren't .com? How come they're not .net? How come why are people things weird like peoplesrights.ws and freedomman.gs? Like, why do they have these weird domain names? It is simply because the government is cracking down through these false methods on people who are exposing them. And the internet's the number one place to expose folks. And so this is how it can be circumvented. There's always a way, and to fight back. But the internet is becoming more and more regulated, as we all know.
So
and this is how it's done.
So you guys know, because this is the first time we talked, I own a whole bunch of companies, and one of them is a tech company. So we do cybersecurity and that sort of thing. So I am pretty familiar with that. And there's always ways to fight back if you really know what you're doing. And they kept going after me because I've been attacked brutally because I'm pretty mouthy and I say whatever needs to be done. I'll call people out, and I've got a lot of lawsuits that I filed because and that I'm either filed or be a part of, and I call it out for what it is, and so I understand that. But remember, people, you don't have to be afraid. It's just like when they were attacking us. We get to watch all the APIs, and we watch all of the IP addresses and everything else behind the scenes. We're watching it all the time. And we've been attacked by South Korea was attacking us for quite a while. And we would have tens of thousands of hits in minutes, literally minutes, where they were hacking us. They were using bots to go after us and everything. And one of the things that we did, and I warned everybody, I said,
South Korea or North Korea?
I'm sorry, North Korea. And so every time that they went after us, I said, just wait, guys, you're going to keep going after me and we're going to keep coming back. And it's going to be like playing whack-a-mole with Donna Brandenburg. And you're going to have 100,000 of me out there to go after. And it's not going to end well. And so we actually put up a couple of nodes on the dark web. So we have so many multiple ways to get the message out there. And when all the telecom companies were going down there, when the RNC was up, we were watching it. All of the graphs matched. This was a systemic attack against our communication infrastructure. We've had another one in the past few days because all of the countries with Stan in their name, whenever Stan shows up, it's never a good day. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that. They had something called Polygon out there where they were doing cyber war games out there on the 10th and the 11th of September, and right around September 11, right? And we were watching it, and it was the same thing on all the graphs that were happening and the attacks on our infrastructure. So there are ways to go around that. So don't let them chase you down or make you afraid of anything. Just keep going. And to find an offshore option is a great option. There are other options. I wanted to put a couple things that was in the chat. Denise, who's on here, who's also part of my resolutions team, that we just put out 5 new resolutions for the Constitution Party, which I'm a vice chair in the state of Michigan for. Denise said, I'm familiar with CPS as a friend in college fleeing Vietnam with siblings was taken in by Bethany in Western Michigan. She was in foster care in horrible conditions. She was sexually assaulted. They actually locked cabinets and refrigerators to keep her from eating their food. She escaped to live with her older brother. She wanted to write a book, but has not done so. Denise, we're going to talk because she needs to come on here. I've broken apart the 990s of Bethany and other organizations and can conclusively say that what we're seeing here is human trafficking, and they're being paid for it.
They're being paid for it, and when people say, "How could that happen? How could foster care parents, be molesting children or people getting sexually abused?" It's the most common thing that happens, and one thing that people don't realize is registered sex offenders are allowed and permitted to be foster care parents in all 50 states.
When you look at Bethany, over half of their $400 million budget is going to not foster care or adoption. It's going to refugee services for helping to fund, taking money for funding this invasion of the United States of America. Screw all of you out there that are involved in this. We know who you are, and there's going to come a judgment day on every single one of these organizations that are playing ball in human trafficking into the United States of America.
I think there's going to be a judgment too with Christians who are sitting on their blessed assurance, being convicted and being too scared to do what the Lord asks them to do. And so I think people very well better start praying hard and, walking on their knees, because you also will be convicted if you are a milquetoast.
Well, look at how they throw the word Christian involved in it, and all of a sudden that's supposed to make everything right. Okay, I'm a Christian. We're all Christians here. I'm going to say believers in Jesus Christ, okay? Yeah. And there's so many organizations that are wolves in sheep's clothing that we have to get away from that and ask a lot of questions and question, because where are pedophiles going to go? They're going to go where children are. They're going to go into those things
fish where the fish are.
That make us stop questioning and just accepting it because we bit the headlines. And so all of those organizations, the 501c3s that we've seen being involved in stashing ballots in our elections, and all of it, we have to ask the hard questions and be willing to say, hey, this ain't happening on my watch. And quite honestly, I don't care if I live or die because I know where I'm going. So we can stand with complete confidence in doing the right thing, and the consequences will be what it will be.
I'll say kind of overall, all of this is possible because the American people pay for it.
That's exactly right.
It's possible because of that. You're talking about the danger of funds going towards refugees and so forth, at least towards that funds. Well, we think, if there's truly a need to help people as refugees, that is certainly Christian. That is certainly something that we're taught and actually demanded to do by the Lord, by the Creator, right? So if we stop doing that, we stop obeying the Lord. But the problem here is it's being done through government. Government is forcing us to pay them to give up our fruits of our labors to pay them. And then they are using that funds incorrectly to put us in danger or to cause problems to our families and so forth. And so as a Christian, and I'm going to say it, you can't pay your taxes. Oh my goodness. Did I just say that? You cannot pay your taxes. Anybody disagree with me? I mean, if you disagree with me, I'll take it all the way to the end. If you pay these wicked people to do these wicked things with your money, then you are wicked.
Let me ask everybody this, because you ever wonder why all the countries across the world hate America, and there's so many things out there on hate America? It's because the money that we put into them never gets to the people. It's the corrupt global crime syndicate that skims off the top and puts it in their pockets. And I think the same thing is happening with the refugees. I really want to know how much money that these refugees are actually getting for what they allege is taking care of them. When you look at the corporate structure on what's happening with the whole hotel system, the hospitality system, who owns all these hotels, and who is also getting paid $400 to $800 a night per refugee. You can't tell me that's going to the refugee. That's going in the pockets of economic warfare against we the people.
Well, let me point this out, and I'll prick a little bit of your listeners' consciences, and maybe all ours do. So Diego pointed out how most churches are very pro CPS, Child Protection Services. They're very pro, and they are. Well, let me be a little more poignant on this. Why are most churches pro, Christian churches pro CPS? It's because if the government isn't taking care of children in the way that they're supposed to, they have to.
That's right.
It is the church's duty. It is first a family's duty, but if the family fails, then it's supposed to be the church's duty to take care of those children. But if the government's not doing it, then they have to do it. And the churches, most Christian churches are across this country, won't do it, don't want to do it, don't feel like they want to put their money towards it, and they're glad that the government is doing it. So they're pro CPS. But that is wrong. The government should not be in the child protection services business, period. None. Not one dime should go towards that for many reasons. But if the churches aren't, first of all, if the families are not doing it, then the church needs to do it. But if the church is not doing it, then the government has, and what ultimately the government has come in and forced it, and the churches are like, great. And that's the same thing with welfare. You know,
exactly the same.
That's why the churches love the welfare program. That's why the churches love CPS. That's why the churches love the government getting into the refugee crisis and so forth. Because then the churches don't have to do that. And guess what? The pastors get to put that money in their pocket. They get to build bigger homes, bigger churches, and they do it. They're grinding the faces of the poor by taking money from people and putting it in their own pocket, into their own buildings, and saying, well, the government is already taking care of these issues. And that is what it is. It's a wickedness within the Christian churches.
Thank you.
False,
I love that you got that. That is so important to say. We need to stop these 501c3 government churches who have fallen down on all you got to do is look at the masks and the ones that closed their doors during COVID and let everybody die alone, where they cowered in the corner because they sold out to that 30 pieces of silver. Every bit of this nonsense needs to be abolished and cleaned up. And we have government schools that are indoctrination camps, and we've got these churches that are absolutely nothing more than completely apostate and absolutely, if you're controlled by the money part of it like that, it is completely in allegiance to Satan. The doors need to be closed. The 501c3s need to be absolute, and I mean permanently closed. If they can't handle what's happened, they need to be closed and go back to home churches or where there's no money involved in it, where we actually love each other and take care of each other. It's terrible.
And a pastor might be saying, am I one of those people? Well, look at how many families you have helped If you're not distributing the funds that are donated to you to families to help them, if you're not helping families or children that need help, if there's not homes that are created for families and children that need help, then you're not doing your job. Because that is the very definition. Luke defined what pure religion was. And it is helping the poor, visiting the naked, visiting those in jail, helping the widows. That's what it is. It's not getting on a pulpit and preaching the
It was
Bible.
James, but go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. It was James. Thank you.
There's the accountability guy.
Yeah. No, I love
The
that.
whole thing.
So
It's false altruism, and the thing is it's individualism. So Jesus didn't say, hey, go create an organization called the government and then do all the good deeds through that. He said, you do it,
That's
individually, just like being saved. You can't be saved for your kids. You can't get your kids saved. They have to decide to be saved. And so it's the same concept of individual responsibility that we've strayed so far from, that now it's treasonous to say such things about individual responsibility in this day and age.
yeah,
That's exactly right.
the way the Lord created a welfare program is to abase the rich and to lift up the poor voluntarily.
Yes.
Voluntarily. It is for the rich to. Got another phone call. It is for
It's
for
real,
the rich
guys. It's just real.
For the rich to take the blessings that the Lord gave them and lift up the poor voluntarily. That is the welfare program from the Lord, our Creator. That is it. It's that simple. And the church can help facilitate that. But individuals need to do that, because there are people that need our help. There are children that need our help. There are families that need our help. But there should not be a government element involved, because they point the gun at us, take the money. The bureaucrats take about 70% of it and then trickle down unrighteously to whoever they want to get it, which usually is not the right people. And then the poor are still suffering. And
if you take a look at the war on poverty, which we call it here in the United States of America, how many trillions of dollars have been transferred? Transfer of wealth from allegedly the rich to the poor. People have done those statistics, so you can look at them. It's literally trillions of dollars. But the situation is no better. In fact, it's worse. It's not like we have less poor, now than we have after we've transferred. That's not the case. What both Ammon and Lori have said here is exactly right. I agree wholeheartedly, and we didn't plan this in advance, but it's absolutely right. That responsibility is our individual responsibility. I was a pastor for 10 years of a inner city church in Central California, so this stuff is near and dear to my heart, because that's exactly, what we had to do. We had to take care of that at the inner city level, the church level. It's our personal individual responsibility, not the government's. If you do it through government, first of all, it's never going to work because you're breaking God's law. But from a practical matter, you can see exactly what Ammon's talking about. When you and I, as individuals, if you help out a family, if you do it through a church institution or any type of faith-based organization, or regardless if it's faith-based or not, I don't care. If it's local and it's not government, people are thankful. They have gratitude. They will actually say thank you. If you go to someone, you give them a meal, thank you. But if they go to the welfare office and they get food stamps or they get their little, EBT card, they feel entitled. You owe this to me. I should get more of this. I want more. Give me more of this stuff. That entitlement comes from us breaking God's law. When it's on a local level, instead of some type of bureaucratic top-down system, people have to work with you, look to you eye to eye. It's even part of our government system that we have created. The reason we're supposed to have these representatives is that we're supposed to be able to see them at the grocery store, see them at church, so that they feel ashamed when they do something wrong. They want to hide behind the mass institutions, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. And there is just a whole lot of corruption, even in these, faith-based institutions and organizations. It's sad, but this just goes back to the humor, like where people say, Ammon Bundy and people's rights, and these people, they're anti-government. They're anti-helping out the poor guy. Now it's going to be the other way around. They'll be like, oh man, Ammon's a socialist. He says we should take from the rich and give to the poor. He never said that. He said it's the duty of the rich to give to the poor, and that duty comes from God. It doesn't come from government. So each one of us have to have that individual responsibility. And look, you don't have to be Elon Musk. Nobody has to go out there and say, well, I got billions. And that's the problem with the mentality of people today in America is we think that everything costs millions and everything costs billions. Nothing could be further from the truth. If all the individual people who name the name of Christ all did their part, you helped one person, all you can help one person. If everybody did their own part, number one, God would bless you and you'd be wealthier anyhow. But it's everybody doing a little bit here and a little bit there. That is what feeds the whole. It's not these top-down institutions that have $1 billion budget. That's a bunch of garbage. Each one of us individually, it's basically there's 4 spheres of government in the Bible. Individual government, there is a family government, church government, and state government. All of them, every last one of them is ordained by God. But they all have a certain jurisdiction that they're not allowed to go beyond that realm. Incidentally, state government, as defined in the Bible, specifically in Romans 13 and many other places, has basically 2 responsibilities that are the same responsibilities that are put in the Constitution because our founding fathers were inspired by biblical truth to create our government. And that's basically just to protect the people and to execute justice. That's it. Anything beyond protecting the people and executing justice. So we have, our legal system, our court system, and defense. Everything else is unbiblical and unconstitutional. Education, unbiblical. Healthcare, unbiblical. Childcare, unbiblical. I mean, basically, you could take 80+% of the federal budget and almost all state budgets. It's all unbiblical, all of it. Well, who's supposed to be doing that? Who's supposed to be educating the children? Families, individuals, and the church. All these things, we have the jurisdiction, and this is exactly what Ammon was saying. I couldn't agree anymore. Is that we all have this kind of natural fallen nature, where we don't want the responsibilities that God has given us. And it goes all the way back to the beginning with Adam and Eve, right? God asked Adam, hey, did you eat of the fruit that I told you not to eat of? And what did he say? He didn't say, oh man, I messed up. He blames God. He said, no, God, it's the woman that you gave me. You gave her to me, so it's your fault. He's trying to shirk his responsibility. So he turns to the woman. Hey, did you do this? No, God, it wasn't me. It's the serpent. It's his fault. It's not my responsibility. From the very beginning of our fallen nature is shirk your responsibility. Get rid of it. Do not be held accountable. Alleviate yourself of the responsibility given to you by God's law. And we see it still to this day. So what are the churches doing? Hey, we have an accountability, things we're supposed to be doing. But if we don't do it, the government will. Family, same thing. If I don't do this, the government will. Individuals, same thing. If I don't do this, the government will. And so everybody's shirking their responsibility, and the government's like, yeah, now I get to grow and metastasize like a cancer because everybody else is kicking off their responsibility. So when the church doesn't do its role, when the family doesn't do its role, and when you guys as individual believers don't do your role, guess who gets to grow like as big and as far and as wide as possible? Government.
And everybody loves it because they don't have to do their role. Amen.
Well,
Amen.
they just say, well, I am doing it. I'm doing it because I pay my taxes and I'd even pay more, and so it's that,
It just drives me crazy when they say that stuff,
and
Lord.
so, it's not just they're saying, well, if I don't, they're saying, well, I am doing it by paying my taxes.
But if you're a Christian and you're paying your taxes, then you are participating in the wickedness. And every dollar you pay into this wicked system, you are going to be accountable for. Sorry.
Even if you write under duress and coercion on the check line.
Yeah. Because guess what? That's just a cop out too, Lori. I hate to say it. It's a cop out too.
All right. Now this is getting juicy.
I love this. This is a great discussion.
We're talking about.
Oh no, we've talked about something controversial today, like we do every day.
Well, we're talking about things that we're supposed to be doing, right? And that we can do. Well, stop funding wickedness. Stop funding it.
Well, their tax, the 16th Amendment, it started just going right down the hill from there. Yeah. And the taxation, what I like about the rightful president of the United States, because I got to get this in on every show, Donald J. Trump, who had the election stolen from him, is that he actually set us up for absolutely a wonderful opportunity for complete and amazing tax. I'm not going to say overhaul. I'm going to say constraint back to the way that it was supposed to be. None of our income tax is legal. Not the way that it's done. no one should ever have to pay property tax or income tax, because property tax just makes you a leaseholder. You don't ever own your land if they can take it away. And income tax, they didn't even get that right, because income tax, you can't tax a man or a woman on their time. It's supposed to be through the companies for gain. So every single thing they got wrong on this. But he did set us up in a spectacular way to have our taxation system righted, because it's so out of, most people don't even realize we're above an 85% tax rate, and that's every single human being in the United States. And when you throw inflation on top of it, which is a undeclared tax in a way, we're in the negatives, but every single one of us is above 85%.
Well, so just to ask a question that I asked a lot of socialists, to get to Ammon's point about what he's saying, is that enabling all this government evil. Yes, a socialist question. Do you think that it is moral or acceptable for somebody to steal from somebody else? Oh no, you can't steal. Okay, but what if somebody steals from somebody else, and then they take some of the money they stole and they give it to poor people, and then they keep the rest for themselves? Is that okay? Oh no, it doesn't matter if they give to poor people, because they still stole from somebody and then they kept some of it. That's totally wrong. Okay, so stealing from somebody else, even if you give some to the poor, is evil. Correct. What if the government does it then? Then what? And then all of a sudden they freak out because you kind of got them trapped at that point, right? It's the same thing. I would say the same thing, like, to kind of add some fuel to Ammon's fire. Is it wrong for me to give money to a murderer in order to enable his murdering? Oh, yeah, that would be wrong. Oh, but what if, like, I gave money to somebody and then that person gave the money to somebody else and that person murdered, but I knew that that's what they were going to do with that money. And is it wrong for me to still give it to them? Well, yeah, of course. Of course it is. But what if I do it through government? Then is that okay? Because again, it's the same story here. And it's not just abortion. It's abortion. It's all these senseless wars all over the world. I mean, look what we did in Afghanistan. Look what we've done in Iraq. Look at every single place. I've traveled throughout Latin America here recently over the last, 10 plus year, 8, 9 years. And all we've done as a country is we left a trail of blood and terror behind us everywhere we go. We've done it for all the wrong reasons. I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, because I love the history of our country. I love the history of what we stood for, when we stood for truth, when we stood for justice, when we stood for liberty. And now we've got more tyranny, and we've got more injustice and horror and terror in the U.S. than almost anywhere. We have a police state in our country that doesn't exist in many other places. We can go down a whole list of all the things that are great about America, but I wish patriots would be honest enough to say, but here's now what's no longer good about America. Here's the things that we're now doing. Yeah. And so when we pay the government, when there are legal and other methods, but there's a stronger responsibility on you to do so, in order to minimize, your tax burden. There's no way that anybody cannot pay any tax, because you're going to go to the store and you're going to buy something and there's going to be sales tax. There's certain things that, and there's a level of taxation that is, quote unquote, biblical. There's a whole article on our Freedom Man website about that. You'd be shocked what the percentage is. It's less than 1%, by the way. And I'm like, sign me up if you just simply do a biblical analysis. And I'm being serious. Just go, there's right there on our website, how much taxes should a Christian pay? And I agree, wholeheartedly with the whole concept that we cannot be funding this. We cannot be financing, you and I, individually financing wicked and evil. Just like everything else, there's a limit to, to our involvement. And at some point in time, we're going to say, what am I enabling? Because if government, go ahead.
I was just saying, imagine, Diego, to add to it right on, imagine that you could dye $100 bill, right? And you dyed it purple or whatever. And then you could follow that $100 bill. And
man.
Imagine if that $100 bill paid for a CPS agent to take a child away from an innocent family, or paid for, something like that actually destroys our country, because that's really what you should be able to do, right? And that's why consumption tax is only the only righteous way to tax a people. And it's very important because the other thing that's not right, it's not right for people to have to defend us and truly defend our liberty and us not pay for it.
That's right.
Or it's not right for us to drive on these awesome, really nice roads and transportation that we have and we get to benefit and not pay for it. That's
Clearly,
not
you
right.
haven't been in Michigan lately.
Well, maybe not.
we haven't,
Well-
but it's funny here, Ammon, as we're having this conversation here live. I'm like, this sounds like the Keep Idaho plan.
Yeah,
But the thing
exactly.
about what we're saying here is that, again, we believe in government. I know I do, but I only believe in government to the extent that it's biblical, and I therefore also only believe in financing that which is biblical. If we were only financing just, executing justice, having a justice system, enforcing contracts and things like this, and protecting the people, I'm all about that. Let's finance that. We need to make sure that our military is funded. We need to make sure the police department, police agencies are funded. I think we should also vote them in instead of appointing them, but that's another story.
Well, that's the sheriff's office, which is the only truly constitutional law enforcement that we have.
Because they're accountable to the people, and I agree,
And how they get
wholeheartedly.
How are they getting funded?
But they need to be paid, right? They're not volunteers. We should be paying them, and that's fine. But they should be paid just to the extent of what they do. We also don't need sheriff's office and police departments to have MRAPs and to have basically like military style weapons and these types of things, because that's the way we funded them now. Like people are saying, hey, we need to fund more of the police. The police need more money. I'm like, where and why? What we need is less crime, less criminals, and we need to have peacekeepers. That's what the police used to be. They're there to keep the peace. Now they're like all military agents and military soldiers out looking for somebody to harm. And
Now they're law enforcement. Enforce.
Exactly.
They're not there to be
enforcement. Very well stated, Lori. And the reality is this: these things can't grow and they can't metastasize like a cancer if they're not financed. And how are they being financed? They're stealing it from us. They're stealing it from us.
From your
And
income.
most people are like, well, they're stealing it from me. I'm just going to bend over and just take it because that's what it takes to live here. And that, I think, is unfortunate because, every single person can take it upon themselves to do what is necessary to not participate in any of these things. I don't want to participate in stealing, kidnapping somebody else's grandchild after mine was kidnapped. I don't want to participate in aborting another baby. I don't want to participate in blowing up some innocent child in Pakistan with some drone strike because he was playing soccer someplace too close to where the CIA was doing some illegal, attack. We can go on and on and on and on. I mean, we got these two wars going on in the Ukraine and in Israel. And you talk about a hot button, you talk about getting shut down, you talk about those issues. Do you have any idea how many Christian people live in Gaza? How many Christian people are in Russia and Ukraine on both sides of the fence, right? On both sides of everywhere you go. And we're like, kill them all, kill them all. We're killing Christians. We're funding the murder of Christians in these other countries simply because the propaganda tells us you have to choose a side, which is ridiculous. In most of these conflicts, both sides are bad. Most of them, you think Putin's a good guy, you think Zelensky's a good guy. We got two bad guys, but you have to pick a side because that's how the political parties have propagandized you. But there's Christians in Russia, there's Christians in Ukraine, and we're killing them. And we're funding it and financing it. And churches sending money over to kill their brothers because the U.S. propaganda says so. I'm a Republican. We're supposed to support all those efforts. It's ridiculous. And we have to start looking at those things specifically because God forbid that I'm going to stand on Judgment Day and I'm going to be held accountable for me promoting and supporting the death of my brothers simply because of my own ignorance or my own lack of desire to know the truth. I just wanted to play the, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I'm just going to not bother with anything. I'm going to comply with everything because I don't want the responsibility of having to look into it for myself. And that is, I think, ultimately what both Lori and Ammon and everybody here is saying is we have to be responsible. This is what people's rights is all about at the end of the day, right? We can't say, I want someone else to be come in and save us all. No, this is neighbors defending neighbors. If my neighbor is going to be free, I've got to defend him. And if I'm going to be free, my neighbor has to defend me. And I think at the end of the day, That's the whole principle behind this whole movement.
Well, not to mention that, you can't expect somebody to defend your rights more than you're willing to go to defend your rights, because
Well said.
that's a perverted concept. You shouldn't expect that somebody should fight harder than you for you.
So I feel a little irresponsible here because I set this up to say we should pay our taxes, right? And then on the other hand, I said, oh, there's things that we enjoy that are paid by taxes that we have a responsibility to pay for, right? And so maybe I just want to clarify a little bit, because income tax is very much unconstitutional. You touched on that, Donna, and that's where most of our corruption comes from, especially on a federal level. People ask, well, if you're not going to pay your taxes, well, how do you really enjoy the roads? Well, yeah. And I pay every time I buy a gallon of fuel, every single time. It's a consumption tax, and it goes for a specific purpose. And these consumption taxes are, I believe, the only righteous way to tax a people. And so, yeah, I do pay my taxes. I pay a lot in consumption tax. I pay a lot in sales tax, and I'm glad to pay those taxes for the most part. Now, property tax, well, unfortunately, our property tax pays for most of our local law enforcement and so forth. That's an unrighteous tax because
it's the most unrighteous of all of them.
Yeah, because it deteriorates the private property. It makes it so the state owns all of it in essence, and you're just a renter. We need to get rid of property tax. And how can we pay for our local law enforcement and so forth, and the things that we do need limited? Well, that should be done through consumption tax as well. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I felt irresponsible there by presenting a problem and not clarifying the actual solution. The solution to funding righteous government in a righteous way is through consumption tax. But this but income tax, if you pay your income tax, I believe personally, I believe that it's unchristian. You are paying for things that are extremely wicked and that funnel right into extremely wicked purposes. And so,
well, Ammon, for perfect clarification, you still have your website up, don't you? Your governor's website up, isn't it still live? Vote Bundy.
Go votebundy.com, and you can go to the topics there.
And you have the entire clarification of your stance on taxes are all right there. Yeah,
it's clear, and it's not really necessarily me or have anything to do me or with my campaign. This is what is biblical, and this is what is right. You cannot fund something that you know is wicked. You cannot allow your money through force or otherwise to go into an organization or a system that promotes wickedness, that takes babies from families, that funds wicked wars, that pays for babies to be destroyed in their mother's womb. If you do that, you are part of it. You are accountable to it. And I'm here saying, look, this is what the income tax goes to. And so therefore, now you are accountable to that.
Well said.
And by the way, I got to get off this call. I've got to go to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
well, good to know. Well, I got to tell you, I'm so honored that you guys are here today and to talk about all of this. We went into the whole thing that the government shouldn't be in marriage at all in the first hour, because it's all about owning it's all about owning all of your possessions. It's about asset capture. And even a consumption test, I'm going to muddy the waters just one more time on this, is that they've done a great job with these unconstitutional and very, very bad public-private partnerships to take over all of our industry and our economic means. So even a consumption tax, you got to look at what you're buying and who you're buying it from, because these big multinational corporations like BlackRock, which, by the way, we found the link between the assassination attempt of President Trump and what happened with that in BlackRock, Vanguard, Arabella, State Street Capital, Nestle, who has been stealing all of our resources out of Michigan, going back to the DNR that owns 4.6 million acres in the state of Michigan and has been grabbing, as you point, the mineral rights as well as the logging rights. And I want to see the receipts on all of this. And it's really become a large problem. And we cannot anymore turn away from this, because it is outright criminal behavior. They have stepped outside of the Constitution, and it is going to be our job to hold them accountable. Now, with that said, I always end with a prayer at the end of our show. And so I can pray, or I would love to hear one of you guys pray for this nation, for everything that's going on, for God's favor to be upon us all, and that for his leading and such. So would anyone like to volunteer for praying?
Diego.
Yeah, I'll pray.
Awesome.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time we had to share here together as brothers and sisters across this country. We pray for our nation. We pray, God, that you would forgive us. You would forgive all of our sins, and you forgive all of our shortcomings, Lord, all of our shirking of our responsibilities. I plead the blood of Jesus over everybody here today on this show. I plead the blood of Jesus over this nation. I pray, Lord, for Ammon, and I pray for our good friend Casey and Lori. And we pray, God, that you would bless Donna and her show and her network, God, that you would keep them safe and protected as they continue to sound forth your truth throughout this country and throughout this nation. We pray, God, for forgiveness. We pray that a spirit of humility would come upon us, that we would bow ourselves before you, that we would turn to your righteousness and repent of all evil and all wickedness, Lord. We thank you for your mercy. We trust and pray, God, that your hand would be upon us as we pray for your mercy, and we seek the repentance, God, that you've put in our hearts, that you'd convict us to do that which is right, and that we would follow that path of righteousness that you've given us in your word. We thank you for this people. We thank you for this time, and we pray in Jesus' name that your will would be done in the lives of everyone here today. In Jesus' name we thank you, and in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 And with that said, thank you guys all so much for coming on. So this is the part of the show, boys and girls, where we go to go to brandenburgforgovernor.com, because I am the best non-conceder that has ever not conceded in the history of the United States. And I would like to have a discussion with the rightful president of the United States, President Donald J. Trump, about that. We continue to go on, and I'm not going to concede until we write the elections in 2020, which in 2022, which has an overwhelming amount of evidence, more evidence than any crime that's ever been committed in the history of the world. With that said, God is leading us for sure. He's giving us our time with brothers and sisters together. Don't be afraid. Walk forward. If somebody threatens you, shove it right back in their face. Okay, I'm sorry. This is what we're going to have to do from here on out. And then try to turn them around in love. If they don't turn around in love, then things got to get a little bit more serious. And I don't mean grab your torches and pitchforks. I mean, if somebody threatens you, make sure that they know that you heard them and that there's still no backing down for this. And so furthermore, God bless you all. God bless all those whom you love, and God bless America. If you don't have a good example out there, many of us grew up and had situations like that. If you don't have a good example, be one. We are the ones that are supposed to be here, not backing down to tyranny or any powers of darkness. Stand your ground, unwavering for the truth, and bring the presence of Jesus Christ into this world in service to God, and the privilege of being able to do things that are his. He doesn't need us. He can do this without us, right? And so it's a privilege to be able to serve God here and take part in his good works. Take that to heart. You were chosen to be here at this time, and be very, very humbled, and yet stand in awe of what God is doing in the United States of America. Wonderful people. I pray God's favor would be upon all of you mightily this day. And we'll be back tomorrow. I've got Naval Flight Officer Baron Reinhold on, Captain Baron Reinhold, as well as Chris Deal, the big deal. We're going to be going through the analysis of the assassination attempt on President Donald J. Trump and the connections with that we're finding that look like it's leading up to BlackRock. And so among other things, and then we've got another segment on our J6ers, political prisoners in America. And so thank you for coming on, and I hope to have you all back on again. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.